This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 4 minutes after 10. Things that you probably don't know enough about to justify a very strong opinion about what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. A list. And by the Middle East, I mean specifically between Israel and Lebanon, and obviously more broadly, the entire escalating and escalated conflict. So we'd probably start off with the status of the Druze people in the Golan Heights, 12 of whose children were killed by a missile which Israel insist was fired by Hezbollah. Hezbollah, I continue to deny it, but I think objectively it's probably Israel that are right on this occasion. But you can stick that on the list of things you don't know for sure or things you don't know enough about. And it was in response to that attack upon the Druze children, a community that identifies as Arab and has its roots in Islam, in the Ismaili branch of Islam, which for some reasons I happen to know is the one of which the Aga Khan is the sort of de facto head. And so that escalation, that return of missiles, which Hezbollah have been firing into Israel in solidarity with Hamas since October the 8th of last year, now seems set to be escalating into war. So, I mean, things you don't know enough about. The fact that Lebanon has its own army that is currently being trained by British troops. We are training the Lebanese army, which is essentially an enemy of Hezbollah, which is much better equipped and much more experienced, not least because Hezbollah fighters have been fighting on the side of Assad in Syria. So there's another problem for people who are persuaded that they can have really clear and strong opinions about this. You've got a problem with Assad, right? A huge problem. Hezbollah are on his side in the conflict in Syria. The legal status of the Golan Heights themselves, of course, is indisputable, but again, something about which many people may not know enough, not to mention the membership of Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet, up to and including the people with convictions for inciting racism and supporting a terrorist organization, or at least in the case of Itamar Ben-Gvir, the person. I remember the first time somebody told me that there were people in the Israeli cabinet, although there was one sort of prominent member of the Israeli cabinet who has a terror conviction, supporting a terrorist organization and inciting racism. And yet, you know, historically, that is the government with which the British have sided and in some ways continue to side. And I could carry on. I mean, things you didn't know. I don't know whether I should have known more about the role that the UK plays in training or helping the Lebanese army to get onto its feet at the moment, but I didn't know until yesterday the full extent of that. And yet, the more we look at this escalation, and as you know, the United Kingdom and our allies in this field have called for a temporary ceasefire, a 21-day pause in fighting. The more you find yourself returning to the same question. And I don't like, as you know, simple solutions to complicated scenarios, but I do know that that most roads in the last 6 months have led to Benjamin Netanyahu and the widespread perception that conflict keeps him in power. It's not dissimilar, philosophically, I suppose, or tactically, to the theory of Vladimir Putin's continuing ambitions in Ukraine and in other sovereign territories over which he has no democratic right. That you keep fighting and it sustains your position, it sustains your power. The problem today is that there is a case, it's not even a problem, there is an obvious case for stopping Hezbollah firing missiles into territory in Israel from which tens of thousands of people have been relocated. I don't do hierarchies, you know that. If you're new to the program, this is not a space where anyone really is allowed to tell anybody else that they should feel more sorry about a dead Israeli or a dead Druze or a dead Palestinian baby than they should about a dead Israeli or a dead Druze or a dead Palestinian baby. I mean, that symmetry of sympathy, I'm afraid, is going to be statistical. You will feel worse about 40,000 dead people or 20,000 dead people than you will about 10 or 200 or 1,000. I mean, it is just a simple statistical response for anybody who is truly objective. And of course, being truly objective is a very difficult thing to achieve in this field. So the case for Israel's escalation is Hezbollah's retaliation or their solidarity with Hamas in Gaza. They have said that they will stop firing missiles into Israel as soon as Israel stops killing people in Gaza. A ceasefire in Gaza means a cessation of hostilities in Lebanon. And so the question of why this inexorable push to war continues remains unanswered. And it can't possibly be 100% responsibility on either side. It can't all be on Hezbollah and it can't all be on Israel. The argument that Hamas wanted a fight is absolutely irrefutable. Whether or not it expected or wanted this level of carnage in the Gaza Strip is, for our purposes this morning, moot. And if Hezbollah was not comfortable with the idea of serious escalation across that territory, then they would not be still firing missiles into Israel. So you can't attribute responsibility for the accelerating horror to one side, but you can wonder whether the path to peace, or at least the path to ceasefire, is being blocked more by one entity than another. And that is when you return to the vexed question, to the Groundhog Day question of whether or not the world is watching the same thing happen again and again and again, while subscribing to that sort of misattributed Einstein quote about the definition of insanity being the decision to do the same thing again and again and again without expecting anything different to return to, while expecting a different outcome. And that, of course, plays us into the history of war between Israel and Lebanon, which has never before achieved what Israel, or Netanyahu at least, and his allies seem to think that it will achieve this time. The far-right Minister of Finance in Benjamin Netanyahu's government has rejected calls from the Israel opposition leader that they accept this ceasefire proposal, but only for 7 days, and said that Hezbollah must not be given time to recover, and that the only way to return displaced residents to northern Israel is the surrender of Hezbollah, which is never going to happen, or war, which increasingly perhaps is. He says Israel's campaign should end in one scenario: crushing Hezbollah and denying its ability to harm residents in the north. So there it is. I mean, I don't come at this with any particular conviction, except the refusal to feel more sorrow about the death of people from one community than I do about the death of people from another. And the sense that the allies calling for a ceasefire are doing what they've done in Gaza for most of the last year without realizing the repetition is one that I resist, because it seems too pat, it seems too glib, doesn't it? To do the Groundhog Day argument, to say this is never going to change. But I think the question I want to ask you this morning is whether there is any concept, any prospect of peace while Benjamin Netanyahu remains in power, and people like Itamar Ben-Gvir and the man with convictions for inciting racism and supporting a terrorist organization, and Bezalel Smotrich, the far-right Minister of Finance, while he relies upon them for his retention of power, peace is impossible. And the only counter I can see to that depressing conclusion is the plausibility of eradicating Hamas or Hezbollah. And it seems to me that's the elephant in the room from almost day one of this conflict, almost since the October the 7th terror attack on Israel. The plausibility of eradicating these organizations, which I never really bought. I've got to be honest with you. I think in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th, there was a temptation of buying into that very dangerous worldview that Israel had been gifted the right to do whatever it wanted in retaliation to that terror attack. I think some people flirted, possibly even consummated that position quite quickly and then resiled from it when they thought, oh no, crikey, I didn't mean that, or I didn't mean that much. I didn't think anyone was going to go that far. But the notion or the argument that it was all about getting the hostages released, that disappeared over the horizon quite quickly. And it obviously has no application whatsoever in Lebanon. But the plausibility of eradicating originally Hamas and now, listening to Bezalel Smotrich, now Hezbollah, seems to me to be, it seems to me to be ridiculous. You can never eradicate these sort of organizations. You can never eradicate these thoughts. And the more I look at Gaza, the more I think that claims that the plan was to eradicate Hamas look grim and ridiculous. Because unless you are determined to kill everybody there, then the more people you kill, the more resistance and resentment you foment. Isn't that obvious to everybody? So if you are under attack for, things done not by you, then the likelihood of you developing sympathy for the people fighting against the people attacking you, surely it increases. I'm not sure we talked about this enough, and I'm not sure we're going to talk about it in depth today because I want to get stuck into the detail of what's unfolding in Lebanon. But it's just impossible, isn't it, to eradicate either of these organizations? Probably Hezbollah even more than Hamas, given its support from Iran and Syria and the sort of sophistication. I think it's the largest non-state militia on the planet. Militia being a technical term, it's also, of course, a terrorist group under international law, just as the Golan Heights are illegally occupied under international law. But then we come back to the symmetry of sympathy and the picking and choose. Oh, no, we don't recognise that bit of international law, but we do recognise that bit. We're not a terror group, and the Golan Heights are illegally occupied. The Golan Heights are not illegally occupied, and Hezbollah is a terrorist group. So you see the difficulties of objectivity. But without a determination, a desire for the fighting to stop from both sides, then it won't. So the two questions are, is the eradication of Hamas and Hezbollah that senior Israeli politicians insist is the end game even vaguely plausible? 0345 6060 And are we having the same conversation that we've had the last half a dozen times that we talked about Gaza? Are we now having that conversation about Lebanon? And this is where your knowledge will be a little bit more deep than mine, perhaps, because especially if you're going to answer no to this question. Are we having the same conversation essentially now about Hezbollah and Lebanon that we have been having about Gaza and Hamas, and in both cases plus Israel, which is there will be no peace as long as Benjamin Netanyahu remains Prime Minister of Israel. It doesn't really matter what anybody else does, whether it's the leaderships of Hamas and Hezbollah or whether it's the international community calling for a ceasefire. There will be no peace. There will be, or at least let's say there will be no ceasefire. There will be no ceasefire while Benjamin Netanyahu is Prime Minister. And the only prospect of peace, therefore, there it is. Thank you for your patience. So there will be no ceasefire while Benjamin Netanyahu remains prime minister. And there will be no peace unless Hezbollah and Hamas can genuinely be eradicated, which strikes anybody honest isn't fair, anybody vaguely objective, and I presume some people who are very subjective as well, as absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. So a couple of texts just to give you an idea of what my life is like when we wade ourselves into the space that we are about to occupy. One comes in and says, so you would hate to see Hamas and Hezbollah eradicated, would you? Are you in the pay of Iran, James? And this from Harley says, meaningless time wasting. Why will you not recognize this in favor of your monotonal hatred of Israel? So there are two texts in the space of a 15-minute introduction to this program, one accusing me of being in the pay of Iran and one accusing me of hating Israel. So you understand why I talk about a symmetry of sympathy. You understand why those of us who feel a professional responsibility, never mind a moral one, to try to steer a path through these rocks of rhetoric, have to cling to the symmetry of sympathy. What I would call, I've not heard that phrase before, the symmetry of sympathy. And that is how you can end up being accused by two people who have just listened to exactly what you listened to. You can be accused of being in the pay of Iran, and you can be accused of hating Israel at the same time. Absolutely extraordinary. What do you think? Where does that question take you? Where does that question take? And there it is. There is the Zionist accusation, allegation as well. So, does it all come down to the impossibility of eradicating Hamas and Hezbollah and the immovability, if you like, of Benjamin Netanyahu? Because I think it probably does, but I can't wait to hear from you. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And on a much more serious note than escalating all-out war and particularly febrile international relations, Andy's been in touch to say, stop sucking your teeth, James. Andy, I'll try.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 23 minutes after 10, and I won't get overly distracted by this because I suspect that it kind of engages me rather more than it engages you. But you'll remember that we began this conversation by remembering the attack on 12 children from the Druze community in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights that left 12 children dead and prompted the escalation in Israel's attacks upon Lebanon, because Hezbollah was widely believed to have committed that attack, to have fired the rocket that killed the 12 children. Hezbollah deny it, but you will have heard me say it seems close to impossible that it wasn't Hezbollah that did it. You heard me say that, right? Because Leslie was listening to the same show, and Leslie's been in touch to say, you actually are disgusting. The Druze children were killed by Hezbollah. Your hatred for Israel is so profound you can't even be honest. And I read these out occasionally just to show you how impenetrable the ears of some people are when we have this conversation. So you heard me describe the killing of 12 children as the actions of Hezbollah, with the caveat that they deny it. But I don't believe them. And I'm not sure anybody does. But Leslie heard me deny it. Leslie heard me say that it wasn't them that did it because I hate Israel so much. And I want to point this out. I don't think it's going to help Leslie. I think she's beyond any help whatsoever in the context of ignoring the evidence of your own eyes and ears, as many people in this conversation are. But I want people who nibble at the edges of it, or who are not as deeply immersed in it as I have to be, and as many people are because of their family and their history and their ethnicity. I really think it's important that everybody understands what a mad conversation you can have if you're not careful. Okay? So Leslie, you go and have a lie down, and the rest of us will have a conversation about things that are actually true. Or at least we'll try to. Henry is in Camden. Henry, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How you doing?
Just crack on.
Yeah. So I heard what you said around is it possible to eradicate Hamas? Is it possible to eradicate Hezbollah? I think the answer is no. I'd agree with you there. I think there are several reasons for that. I think, as you say, the war that we're seeing at the moment, as it has done for a long time, creates new generations of hate. I think that's undeniable.
And fear. Hate and fear. And you don't need to be Yoda to understand the relationship between hate, fear and anger, do you?
100% in the same way, right? And this is in exactly the same way that Israeli residents and Israeli citizens on October the 7th, it is more than likely the most...
I'm including that. I'm not for a minute suggesting that hate, fear and anger are confined to either portion.
Of course. But that links to the second point that I have, which is around Netanyahu as well, right? And I think that he, on the one hand, I agree, it's very difficult to achieve peace with him still in power, because I agree with your point around the longer the war goes on for, the longer it cements his position. Right? I can understand that as well. But the Israeli government, and I'll make clear that a more centralist Israeli government would feel the same way. Their primary concern is around the defence and security of their citizens. Right now, what I see in Hezbollah, which I think is slightly different to the war in Hamas, is Hezbollah, as you say, have the largest military arsenal as a non-state actor, a paramilitary group in the world, and their sole intention is to wipe out Israel, as is a similar thing within the Hamas charter, within the Houthi charter. So these are, and those are facts as well.
No, hang on. I mean, I have to remind you that they have said that the missiles currently being fired will stop when there is a ceasefire in Gaza. So,
on this round of occasions,
you've gone immediately to the space where the existential threat to Israel justifies the existential attacks upon Lebanon and Gaza. You're also heading headlong into the. Whether you realise it or not, Henry, that there is no limit on the number of civilians that can be killed in pursuit of what you describe as the defence of Israel against the existential threat posed by Hamas and Hezbollah. So, that's why I talk about Groundhog Day. We're back to the question of, if you start from that point, that you take Hamas and Hezbollah's threats as both permanent and plausible, then you can kill as many innocent Arabs as you want.
But it's not necessarily. It's not justifying the killing of as many Arabs as you want.
It is
that point. It's not, because since the inception of Israel, there have been groups that have wanted to annihilate Israel. And if that is the case, then of course people and governments and citizens are going to live in fear of that, constant. And I'm not denying the fear of anyone else within the situation.
You're eluding the point that we were discussing a moment ago, which is once you claim the permanent and plausible existential threat posed to Israel, you justify, even though you might not sound like Smotrich or Ben-Gvir, you justify the idea that we will carry on until the threat has been completely annihilated, and
so it's not a justification. I think it's just the very, very
no, but it is a justification, because the plausibility of Hamas or Hezbollah destroying the modern state of Israel is as weak, really, as the plausibility of the state of Israel destroying Hamas or Hezbollah. So very unintentionally, but very helpfully for us, you've actually put both or all three groups in exactly the same position, that they keep swearing a dedication to the complete annihilation of each other, regardless, in all cases, of civilian casualties and death, while a truly objective position thinks that the concept of annihilation is impossible.
So I wouldn't say but I would agree with that as well. I think the concept of complete annihilation is impossible. But I think the reality is that where each of these actors lie at the moment, whether it's a Netanyahu government, whether it's Hezbollah leadership, whether it's Hamas leadership, whether it's the IRGC, they are understanding they understand that within the pursuit of war, there is no objectivity in the way that you just said it before, right? And there is a self-determination on all sides. And what I more mean by this is it is the grim reality of the world that we are living in. In an ideal world, yes, none of this would happen. Everyone would be able to live peacefully together. Everyone has a subjective opinion on that. It's impossible to remain truly objective in this situation.
You can't kill your way out of a problem. was what I think a CIA agent on a different program here said yesterday, which is a questionable philosophy. I mean, there are some problems that you probably can kill your way out of. But if you wanted peace now between Israel and Hezbollah, you would stop the offensive in Gaza.
Yes, you would stop the offensive.
So why isn't that happening?
Why aren't they stopping the escalation?
Well, the killing.
But the killing's happening on both sides. And you said before, and it's the point that you started.
It's not,
out
is it?
That you make,
really?
You make well, it is, because you make clear at the start of your point.
If Israel stops killing people in Gaza, Hezbollah would stop firing missiles into Israel. So why doesn't Israel stop killing people in Gaza?
That is an excellent question, but that's not the reality.
It's the show you rang into, Henry. I spent 20 minutes setting up the introduction. That's the question you need to answer. Because I've offered up an answer to that.
If I was able to answer this question,
well, I've answered it.
I'd be an expert in the military.
I've answered it, and I'm not.
So why don't you head off to peace negotiations and give them your start?
Because Benjamin Netanyahu is there, and he is the reason why Israel can't stop killing people in Gaza, because his retention of power and his avoidance of responsibility for his alleged criminal acts absolutely hinges upon staying as Prime Minister. And so this is what I meant by Groundhog Day, and all roads leading back to the same problem. Whatever your position is, whatever your knowledge is, wherever your loyalties may lie, and I unlike you, I think I have no loyalties in this discussion or in this conflict, but the reason why Israel can't stop killing people in Gaza, which would stop Hezbollah firing missiles into Israel, is because Benjamin Netanyahu needs to stay in power.
And then you'd still have a Hamas that, well, maybe less a Hamas, but you'd still absolutely have a Hezbollah with military capabilities, still being funded from Iran, still posing an existential threat.
Military capabilities dwarfed by Israel's.
Dwarfed by Israel's, but it's dwarfed by the IRGC that's been funding them for the last 15 years.
Completely dwarfed. Completely, you know that's true, Henry. It's completely dwarfed by Israel's. That's why I talk about the plausibility. No, stop. Come on. You've had lots of opportunities. You thought you were making a brilliant point when you said I didn't have an answer. I've given you an answer. You know that it's right. So now you're scrabbling around for distraction.
There's nothing to scramble for, James. I just think that you're looking for an answer, and you think you've got them, but actually you're not nearly as subjective as you think you are.
I think you mean objective.
Oh, I do mean objective.
It's 10:32. Thomas Watts has your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:36. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The question of how it ends is one that I think you have to ask, even if there is no answer. Sometimes searching for the answers can leave you better informed than you were before you started, even though you don't actually arrive at an answer. Benjamin Netanyahu, while we've been on air, has instructed his military to continue attacking Lebanon with, and I think I quote, full force, which rather holds below the waterline hopes and indeed reports of an imminent ceasefire. I think Netanyahu's office, and listen, it's a coincidence that this fits entirely with the analysis that I provided you with at the top of the programme. Netanyahu's office dismissing all talks of a 21-day pause in killing, pause in attacking as something confected by France and America and not something that he was ever going to be party to at all, because Netanyahu doesn't want to stop. Why doesn't he want to stop? Well, one answer, which Henry and Camden provided us with a moment ago, is because the threat of Hezbollah and Hamas, either jointly or independently, attacking Israel, eradicating Israel by presumably sending in ground troops, sending in armies capable of overcoming Israel, is profound enough to justify the continuing attempts to kill them off, to eradicate them, which takes us back to the plausibility of eradication. And it's not plausible. It's no more plausible. In fact, I'd probably argue it's less plausible for the forces of Hamas and Hezbollah to, in some sense, destroy the modern state of Israel than it is for the modern state of Israel to eradicate Hamas or Hezbollah. But all three of them are completely impossible. And that's where you talk about asymmetry of sympathy. That's where a moral equivalence kicks in. You look at the impossibility of it happening and the speed with which everybody trying to justify its continuation arrives at the existential threat argument. We have to eradicate Hamas and Hezbollah because they want to eradicate us. We have to eradicate Israel because they are an illegal entity, or they have eradicated us. They have removed us from our land. Peace isn't going to be at the end of either of those roads, is it? Peace is going to be a tense standoff, which, as the years pass and the generations change, becomes less tense. And the model for that, albeit that there are lots and lots of differences, that the model for that is for me, at least, in my knowledge and my worldview, is Northern Ireland. And the idea that peace was impossible when I was a boy or a younger man, the prospect of peace there was absolutely impossible. 10:39 is the time. 0345 60 60973 is the number that you need. So the things that people have the biggest problem with: symmetry of sympathy, genuine objectivity, and recognition of similarity. But I promise you that if you're watching this from the outside, those are the three biggest issues to spring up. That, of course, and the imbalance in coverage in UK and USA, which you can establish that imbalance by looking at how these matters are covered pretty much everywhere else in the world. Gabriella is in Barnet. Gabriella, what would you like to say?
Hi, I wanted to speak to you about what you were saying about eradicating ideas as opposed to eradicating terrorist groups. And I was thinking when you were talking about this, first of all, I agree with so much of what you said about the implausibility of what it seems like at the moment to rid Gaza of Hamas and rid Lebanon of Hezbollah. But one thing,
and don't forget the third point of the triangle is the impossibility of ridding the Middle East of Israel as well.
There's that too, which would be problematic in a few ways. But I think my point is I don't know if you saw some really interesting data that came out of Gaza towards the end of August about that some of the documents about Palestinian support for Hamas had been faked by Hamas, obviously themselves. And actually, after October 7th, when Israel were publishing figures that were coming out of Palestinian polls, that 85% or whatever supported October 7th.
Yes. And
actually, it was way less than that. It was more like 40 to 50%. And then on top of that, what I read this morning is that over 75% of the Lebanese people are not agreeing to house Hezbollah anywhere near their towns, anywhere near their homes. With those bits of information together, I guess it's more of a question than an answer. I definitely don't have the answers. Is there not some hope that within those places themselves, these terrorist groups have a lot less, support than they would have hoped for? And actually, the idea of not eliminating them totally, but dwindling their resources to the point of not being a threat to either their people or to Israel.
Yes.
Is that even possible? I don't
think
know.
it's the only. I think it's the only way to their removal from.
The only glimmer of hope.
Well, hang on,
because
the biggest obstacle to that ever happening is for the territories in which they operate to be under attack from a common enemy. So the support, I suspect, the support is higher now than it was at the beginning.
I'm not sure that's 100%. I don't know if you've seen even protests both in Lebanon and in Gaza from civilians living there are completely against wishing that Hamas would surrender. I've seen so much footage of this, and
yes, but the idea that the possibility of them overthrowing or expelling Hamas or Hezbollah diminishes while the conflict is underway. I mean, not least simply because of time and space and logistics, but also because of the hearts and mind argument that you're not going to come out crosser with the people retaliating against the people attacking you than you are with the people attacking you. If the attacks stop, then your point hopefully moves front and center. Because how do you stop the attacks from starting again? Well, you deal with your side of the problem, which for the peace-seeking civilians of Gaza and Lebanon, if we talk about your side of the problem, we're talking about Hamas and Hezbollah.
Well, the other thing I was going to say about why Lebanon is different from Gaza is that with all the pager attacks, all of these things, obviously they've not officially.
Well, Lebanon is a fragile democracy. That's the biggest difference between
fragile is the word.
Lebanon
But I think it's really interesting what you said about it being a Netanyahu problem, because I agree in so many ways. He's power hungry. He's desperate to stay in power. But with I guess the pager attacks and whatever it was last week, whenever it was, I think there was like this renewed sense in Israel that this wasn't about Netanyahu escalating things to stay in power, because actually most people completely supported that, because actually where so much of the pressure
supporting a ground war and supporting
it's totally different.
Booby trap pagers are two completely different things.
Listen, they don't want to send their sons in there for sure, but I think the point that I'm making more about what's going on now is they don't want a ground war for sure. No one wants to be sending their 20-year-old sons into yet another ground war. Nobody wants that.
Well, you say nobody wants it. Bezalel Smotrich definitely wants it. Itamar Ben-Gvir definitely wants it.
Sorry, when I say nobody, I mean the average Israeli citizen.
Yeah, but they sadly don't make the decision, do they?
No, 100%.
I'm pretty sure the average Israeli citizen didn't want their son being sent into Gaza.
No, absolutely not.
But they don't make the decision. The decision is made by Netanyahu, which is why all these conversations lead back to the question of whether or not his determination to cling on to power, whether it is because he has a sort of view of himself as the only man that can hold Israel together. I don't buy that, but I'm just being generous. Or because he's terrified of facing court, whatever the justification is, everything he does is contingent upon self-preservation and retention of power. So it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter what anybody else.
Well, it does matter what some people think, because actually so much of the pressure he's been under, and I was imagining if there was another leader of Israel, which please God there will be one day, I was imagining what would happen if they were facing the same kind of pressure from the 90,000 displaced families from the north of Israel.
Not to mention the families of the hostages. Not to mention the families of the hostages who increasingly hold him responsible for their.
What to do with that kind of pressure? They hold him
for their family members'
so they
fate.
Were thrilled.
Yeah. Well, I mean, history.
People don't think a ceasefire is enough.
No. Well, history tells us that some of the answers to your question, which would be to be in a lot closer alignment with Israel's historic allies, most obviously the United States and the United Kingdom. But if you were capable of stepping back from the bloodshed and looking at what has changed more since October the 7th of last year than in any other escalation of tension in the Middle East, it would probably be Netanyahu's detachment of himself from the White House and detachment of himself from allies, or from the caution of allies. And you know, that is part of the thesis that suggests all of these conversations are ultimately pointless, because all of the questions are answered by the self-interest and the self-preservation of Benjamin Netanyahu. And of course, the presence in his cabinet of men convicted of terror offences or supremely comfortable in their ethno-nationalism, their ethno-supremacism. It's 10:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Somewhat closer to home, Private Eye, which remains an incredible force for good in this country. Sometimes it feels like it is perhaps the only one, has crunched some numbers, as they are wont to do. And we're supposed to be getting our knickers in a twist today about, I can't remember, is it the fact that Keir Starmer's son stayed in a friend's flat while he was studying for his GCSEs? Or is that what it is? Anyway, £936,000 is the amount in gifts, donations and credit guarantees that we now know Boris Johnson accepted for his wedding, interior decoration and lifestyle expenses, while earning £164,000 a year as Prime Minister. That's actual money, gifts, donations and credit guarantees, not sort of clothes or, well, I suppose gifts could be, but certainly not borrowing a flat. And since leaving Downing Street, in the 4 months since leaving Downing Street, when this calculation was conducted, he'd earned £1.3 million, but received just shy of that, £1,060,500 in free accommodation and donations. So you talk to me about balance probably early next week. We'll have a little look at some of this incredibly irresponsible journalism. Back to the Middle East, also in some cases a site of incredibly irresponsible journalism, particularly I think in the field of some of the reporting that came out in the immediate aftermath of the October the 7th terror attack, and has subsequently found to be wrong, but hasn't been corrected on anything like the scale that it was originally reported. And the other problem there, of course, is the continuing refusal of the Israeli administration to let foreign journalists into Gaza, for example. And I don't mean Al Jazeera, although they shut down Al Jazeera's office in the West Bank last week. I mean Channel 4, BBC, LBC. Can't get people in. And yet, of course, the idea that you have to take your information or get your information from somewhere leaves something of a vacuum in coverage. Susan is in Lancaster. Susan, what would you like to say?
Well, I totally agree with everything you've said about Netanyahu. Hezbollah have said quite clearly that...
Oh, we're going to have to sort your phone line out. I don't know what happened there, but 2 or 3 glitches that mean I couldn't follow what you were saying. We'll try and get that fixed up. Well, John in Bridgend tells us why he picked up the phone.
Hi, James. You're all right.
Hello, mate. What's on your mind?
Yeah, a couple of things, really. I think I tend to agree with most of your points. I've been waiting that long and forgot most of them anyway. But the gist is... what people are forgetting, and seem to be forgetting, and I've watched this UN General Assembly, the world leaders talking about it, condemning Israel, etc., and, over the last day or two, is that UN Resolution 1705 after the 2006, was it? Second Lebanon War, the Israelis called it, where the Hezbollah came across and killed and abducted a couple of Israeli soldiers. So the UN put this, which both parties agreed to, Hezbollah and Israel, a buffer zone, which Hezbollah have moved into armaments into, where we've got UN peacekeepers or UN observers, they're called, which all these countries paid a copious amount of money, and they're not doing the job by the look of it. Do you get where I'm coming from?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I think I do, but the immediate response would be the breaches of international law represented by the occupied territories, and the fact that the International Criminal Court wants to issue a warrant for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas leaders. So I always think it's a bit 50-50 when you start talking about, and also,
Hey, I'm having a debate. I like your debate.
It's not a debate. You asked me a question that if I understood why you were making the point that you're making, and I don't really. So let me steer you towards 2024 if I can, and the questions that we've been asking all morning.
All right, 2024. Do I agree that we have to, or do I agree that Hamas and Hezbollah have to be wiped out? Yes, they're a terrorist organisation. There's no place for terrorism in our Western society, our democracy and world democracy. Terrorism is an evil thing. They're not freedom fighters. They want to wipe off Israel. Hezbollah want to wipe off the ring and back. They want to.
So what's your definition of what's your definition of terrorist?
But a terrorist is what they do. They wreak havoc terror.
But what's your definition of terrorism?
Well, I've been on the back end of terrorism. I was a soldier in Northern Ireland. I've lost friends to terrorism. I'm quite passionate about it. I don't think it...
Well, Northern Ireland has some salutary lessons about the plausibility of eradicating terror groups, doesn't it? How did it work out there?
Well, yeah, me personally...
No, not you personally. The terror groups in Northern Ireland, were they eradicated?
Well, not really. No, they're still going under different names and organisations and doing different things, aren't they? You know what I mean?
I don't really know what you mean. Peace has been achieved on the island of Ireland, despite the fact that the terror groups were not eradicated. In fact, peace was only achieved when they did. Hang on a minute. Okay. When they did, I need to explain why I don't understand what you're telling me. Peace was only achieved when they did in the open what had been going on behind closed doors since Margaret Thatcher and William Whitelaw were in Downing Street, and that they did actually speak to the people that they simultaneously described in slightly simplistic terms, sometimes as terrorists.
Okay. Do you actually think Hezbollah are going to... All right, we've had Hamas representatives sitting around the table with the Qataris, etc., etc. And I think the Middle Eastern countries have got a lot to answer for, to be honest with you.
Okay, I think we're covering a little bit too much territory. So I think, in conclusion, can you name terror groups that have been successfully destroyed?
Well, no, there isn't. But
really, you think there's a first time for everything?
Well, okay, ISIS are creeping back in. Okay, we never.
These aren't trick questions. So you can't think of a single instance in history where a terror group has been successfully destroyed. If anyone ever asks you that again, you could probably go. You might be able to argue the Tamil Tigers, but you think it can be achieved in this time, at this time, in this area. Okay,
I'll rephrase that then. Okay, I reckon, my opinion, they should be destroyed to the fact that they shouldn't be able to attack and wreak havoc and destroy and kill and maim.
And the plausibility of that is where the conversation began, and it is where this conversation ends. Because if you think that you're going to prevent the next generation from taking up arms against the modern state of Israel by killing their parents, then I'd suggest you'd learnt nothing from the terrorist experience that you had as a soldier, John.
Does it stop at Israel?
Pardon?
Does it stop at Israel?
I'm not sure either of us know what
stop at Israel?
I don't know that either of us know what you're talking about now, mate. 10:57 is the time. Back to Susan in Lancaster. I've only got 2 minutes, Susan, so make it good.
Okay, right, quickly. I agree with everything you said about Netanyahu.
Right. I think it's hard not to, but we'll let that pass.
Yeah. We've had the PLO, we've had the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Hamas only rose because the Palestinian Authority weren't doing anything to help the Palestinians. You will never get peace until there's a right to return and the Palestinians aren't generations of refugees, generation after generation. And if it's not Hamas, something else will come in its place.
Do you think you need? I mean, if you're right, then it's going to be even further off than it already feels. But instead of a right to return, a genuine two-state solution with.
I don't think that's possible, because it's the big thing is those settlements and the settlers. And they're taking Palestinian land, they're shooting farmers, they're stopping them getting to their flocks.
So you mean the occupied territories? You mean the occupied territories rather than the NICAB? You're not going back to 1948, you're going back to the 1960s?
Well, sadly, yes.
No, okay. Well, yes, all right, that might be feasible.
And East Jerusalem. But the settlers will not leave those settlements. And the Israeli government will always support the settlers because they want the biblical land of Israel back. And I am horrified now, because I honest to goodness think they don't want peace, they want land. And they're going to carry on taking land whatever way they can do it. And if they kill all the Palestinians or make the Palestinians leave to other Arab countries, Netanyahu and his government, I think that's their long-term aim. I'm horrified.
It is horrifying, and it's something that I'd have argued with you about probably last November, and all I can do now is hope that you're wrong, rather than try to prove that you're wrong, because I think events since the terror attack on Israel of October the 7th, and the way the words have moved, that word proportionate disappeared from discussions a long time ago. I heard the Israeli ambassador on with Nick this morning still making the argument that they try really, really hard not to kill civilians, which makes them incredibly incompetent or liars. So, that has disappeared over the horizon for the consideration of any sensible people. And of course you have the explicit spoken ambitions of people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and the historical observations of Netanyahu himself when it comes to the quotes greater Israel. Sorry, I meant Nakba, not Niqab, but I think, considering I didn't say sausages, we'll call that a win.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 3 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next. Well, I can't say to less choppy waters, but certainly much of the choppiness feels a little less urgent than the escalating situation in Lebanon, in the Middle East. It's an extraordinary story, this. It's been around for a while. The Home Office has been forced this morning to release a very, very critical investigation into the origins of the Windrush scandal. If you've been paying attention, you'll know that the report was actually leaked to The Guardian in May of 2022, but the officials or officials in the Home Office, I think it's fair to say, have been fighting tooth and nail to keep the paper out of the sort of official public gaze, and they have failed. Not least due to the efforts of the Guardian reporter and author of The Windrush Betrayal, exposing the hostile environment, Amelia Gentleman. Why have they failed, Amelia? Why today does this report see the light of day?
Yes, I mean, it is, as you say, it's an amazing story that's been dragging on over 3 years. This was a very, very hard-hitting report commissioned by the Home Office that concluded that all of our immigration legislation between 1950 and 1980 was very, very deep-rooted, included very deep-rooted racism, and was designed at least in part to reduce the number of people with black or brown skin who were permitted to live and work in the UK. So this was the conclusion of this Home Office commissioned report, and officials decided that the content of the report was too hard-hitting to be allowed to be published. So they have sat on it now for 3 years, despite FOI's Freedom of Information requests from The Guardian and from other people. They've been finally forced to release it because a transparency campaigner called James Coombs took it to first to the Information Commissioner and then to a tribunal, and the tribunal ruled against the Home Office and said it needed to be published. So yeah, it's a real victory for transparency campaigners, but just so wrong that they tried to sit on it for so long.
Their defence was based upon the possibility of future provision of advice to the department being compromised. I don't really understand that, but I presume you do.
I'm not sure that the judge did either, or the judge rejected their defences as highly improbable. I think that they were trying to argue that if you commission somebody to write a report and then you publish it, then future people might be worried about writing hard-hitting reports. Yes. I don't know, but the idea is that the arguments were knocked down by the judge pretty comprehensively.
With a rather splendid allusion to Orwell as well, who often gets abused in the context of these kind of conversations, but this judge seems to have actually read his 1984 and the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, it was a very gratifyingly tough tribunal judgment, and the Home Office have this morning uploaded the report. It's called The Historical Roots of the Windrush Scandal onto the gov.uk website. And it should be read. People should go and upload it and read it.
I don't know whether I'm tempting you into territory you don't want to be in, but for many people who are comfortable with the idea of trying to reduce the number of people who aren't white living in this country, to discover that was government policy, or at least that desire was driving government policy up until 1980, that they've long felt that the polar opposite was in play. So how much evidence do we find in the report of the accusation? How much support for the accusation do we find?
So this is a 52-page kind of summary by a Home Office commissioned historian who looked at all of the post-war bits of legislation. And the way that he summarised it is very hard-hitting. He doesn't pull any punches. But it isn't actually news. I mean, if you are a historian, if you've looked at immigration history of the 20th century, you know that throughout the second half of the 20th century, immigration law became tougher and tougher, and it became harder and harder for people who had lived in Britain's colonies to move to the UK. So in a way, it's not that the findings are surprising, because these are facts. It's more that the Home Office was so embarrassed by these facts that they didn't want anyone to focus attention on them.
Can I tempt you to wonder why?
Well, I mean, I think that the Home Office has had such criticism poured on its head for its abject failures that led to the Windrush scandal, which, as we know, saw thousands of people either sacked from their jobs or evicted from their homes, or in extreme cases arrested or deported to countries that they'd left as children. I think that maybe they developed a kind of brittleness that made them, want to go to extreme measures to stop any further criticism. But it seems really absurd when you see it in black and white, because this was a history that was commissioned by the government department using taxpayers' money to fund it. And the whole point of commissioning it was because there was an understanding that the reason why the Windrush scandal happened was because civil servants and ministers didn't really fully understand our own colonial history, the history of empire, and the history of Black Britons in the UK. So it was commissioned for a good and positive reason. And then to sit on it because you feel embarrassed about the conclusions, it is pretty Orwellian.
And this is driven by civil servants. Certainly the desire to keep it under wraps. There are no politicians' fingerprints on this process.
No, I don't think that's right. I think the decisions were made, I think, under one or two of, I'm now not sure whether it was Priti Patel or Suella Braverman, but I also know that Robert Jenrick was one of the people who asked civil servants to continue to bury the report.
So how again, I don't want to tempt you into a territory where you're uncomfortable, but how, I mean, a civil servant's job is to do what ministers tell them, but reading between the lines of your report this morning, there would not have, among some civil servants, there wouldn't have been much reluctance to do what the ministers were telling them because it painted them in or their department in a bad light as well. Or am I getting this wrong?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think this is historical.
You don't have to be polite, Amelia. You can tell me that I'm getting it horribly wrong if you want.
Well, why I think this story is so important, but also so absurd, is because a lot of taxpayers' money, firstly, was spent on commissioning this report, and then secondly, on going through a number of legal hoops to try to get to prevent the public from reading it, and all of it really was for no purpose, because although the report is written in quite strong language and has a very succinct summary of these racist bits of legislation, it's not news. Anybody who wanted to find out about our immigration history could have gone to a library and found it out for themselves. So all of this effort to try and block the publication of a report that was meant to help people understand a bit of our history seems really, really absurd.
And possibly not all roads, but many roads lead to this quote, which you have pulled from the report this morning, that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. Now we know that is a historical fact at which many people, including all three of the politicians that you've just mentioned, balk quite violently for reasons that I'm probably going to explore for the rest of this hour on the programme. But that, if you're searching for reasons why these particular horses were so spooked, that line there perhaps encapsulates much of the answer.
Yes, and there's another line where in the report where it says that major immigration legislation in 1962, 1968 and 1971 was designed to reduce the proportion of people living in the United Kingdom who did not have white skin.
Wow.
So it's there in very bold language, and it's a very powerful summary of immigration history in that part of the second half of the 20th century. But to historians of our immigration legislation, he wasn't saying anything new. It's just, I think, that the Home Office didn't want to be reminded of it.
Yes, and the modern conversations which are unfolding at the moment, up to and including the current Conservative Party leadership battle, speak to some of the themes that the report lays bare. Amelia, gentlemen, yet more sterling work in this field, as she urges you to do. Do have a look at the report yourself, which has been uploaded to the Home Office's website, and I will shortly turn your attention to that quote. Amelia, gentleman, a reporter with The Guardian, author of The Windrush Betrayal. That line there, because I've been thinking about this a lot. The British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. That, to me, is about as close to an irrefutable historical fact as it's possible to get. And yet, and it was Jenrick, I think, recently, who was talking about British values with being under attack without being able to describe what they are. It's quite easy to describe British values. It's right up there with the laziest radio phone-ins of all time. You know, people often end up talking about cricket and cups of tea. But the problem Jenrick had when he talked about British values being under attack or British culture, that was it, British culture being under it, is it's not under attack. what sometimes seems to be under discussion when people claim that things are under attack is the fact. The British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. Why would somebody in 2024 be personally affronted by that or personally upset by that? That's the bit I don't get. I find it absolutely fascinating. And I'll tell you what the tribunal judge wrote, because it is a brilliant evocation of George Orwell's warnings in 1984. The judge wrote, a justification for Winston Smith's constant rewriting of old news stories was explained. That was his job. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Adding, there is no more justification for Winston Smith's work than for withholding from wider readership a significant study of the background to Windrush. So why do some people have a personal problem in 2024 with the simple historical observation that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function? We'll get stuck into this after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
17 minutes after 11. This is one of the questions I can't remember whether I've asked you before, but I don't know what the answers are. And usually I can kind of work out what the answers are. I need you to separate yourself from history. All right? You can have patriotic pride. I think most of us have a form of patriotic pride, although we can disagree over what form it takes. I've told you before that as a younger person, as a child, I used to look at that map of the world and all the pink bits which showed British dominion, and my chest would swell. I'd think, wow, look at us punching above our weight. Look at the size of the United Kingdom on the map, and then look at the scale of the lands that we held. And there's still a little bit of that, despite now knowing a heck of a lot more about the empire than I did. And I don't understand the fear of history. I really don't. I don't understand why anybody in the Home Office would want to keep a lid on an explanation of the Windrush scandal that included the observation that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. I don't understand why people... And the crucial point here is the year in which we're living. In 2024, if we still had an empire, if we were still sucking all of the raw materials and resources out of India that we spent sort of 300 years stealing, then I'd understand why you have to create the idea that we're there doing good, that we're a force for benefit, that we or even that we have a God-given right to be there, which was something that they tried for a while. If we were still benefiting from it financially, then I would understand among both individuals and institutions the need to pretend that we weren't doing anything wrong. Do you see what I mean? If maybe, just maybe, if I lived in a massive stately home that was built upon the profits of slavery, and I was really, really worried that if we didn't nip this in the bud now, then 20, 30, 50 years down the line, my kids might be required to give back some of the historical spoils of slavery and exploitation, then maybe I'd be frightened of the history. But how many of us how many people who live in stately homes still own them, to be fair, as opposed to just being tenants of the National Trust? It's really fascinating to me. As a deep lover of history, I'm reading a lot about India at the moment. I have William Dalrymple on Full Disclosure next week, who's written an incredible book about pre-British India, if you like, starting in about 250 BC, bringing us up to about 1250 AD. But his 4 books about the Mughals and his 4 books about the East India Company and what happened when we got there, originally quite a benign presence, albeit not necessarily a justified one. And then subsequently, with the rise of the East India Company, we became an incredibly oppressive regime, essentially pirates and thieves. In fact, William said to me that if you go to India today, this notion, and he lives there, this notion we have that we're sort of viewed, or the empire is viewed through rose-tinted spectacles, the word he used was pirates. They think we were pirates, and we were. You can make a case for us being brilliant pirates. Francis Drake was a pirate. But why would anybody in 2024 be uncomfortable with that historical fact? The British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. Of course it did. You can't turn up in countries to which you have absolutely no right and tell the natives that you were born to rule them without at least some hint of racist ideology. So in and Tory politicians seem to be particularly terrified of this. And I think that when people like Honest Bob Jenrick are claiming that British culture is under attack, they're actually, and you tell me whether this is fair or not, they're actually really frightened of the facts. Is it personal? Listen, if I'm talking about you, I don't want to have a row today. I want to understand why you take it personally. Is it because of that swell in the chest that I described a moment ago? Is it because of the sense that we were special? Because that's a form, or potentially, of racist ideology, isn't it? I looked at the map of the world and Queen Victoria was Empress of India and we were the masters of all that we could survey. That makes me feel very special, even though you'd have been a bog cleaner in the Imperial army. You certainly wouldn't have been on the receiving end of much of the spoils making their way back from the subcontinent. It makes me feel special about being British. And then these people with their pesky facts and history books are taking it away. They're making me feel like the beneficiary of piracy and theft and slavery and exploitation. But why would you care in 2024? Why would you take it personally? Why do people feel personally affronted by statements of fact like the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function? If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's always a bit easier to get on the show if I take a guest in the first part of the programme, which is why I do it so rarely. But I felt that it would be unfair and incorrect to approach this without approaching it from the perspective of the new report and Amelia Gentleman's tireless coverage of it, the newly released report. 0345 60 60973 is the number that you need, because I genuinely don't get it. Remember, I went to prep school. The prep schools in the 1980s when I attended were probably the last bastion of empire in this country. So you had a lot of the history that we were taught was quite jingoistic. The authors that we were encouraged to enjoy were sort of not challenging really the notion, in fact celebrating the notion that English men would go to all corners of the globe and take over and take control. And it was sold to us very much as a good thing. And I now realise that it was a great thing for us. In the context of what it did, the infrastructure that it built, the riches that it brought back to this country, it was great. But why do people in 2024 have such a personal problem with the truth? With the simple fact that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function? I have not got a clue. And I'm hoping that you do. 0345 60 60973. What is the personal pain that you feel? And I'm probably saying this slightly in vain. I don't just want to analyse how other people feel. I'd love to know why you think you feel the way that you feel. That's why I'm at such enormous pains to talk about the feeling I used to have when I saw the pink map. It's why I'm talking about the teachers I had who were good people, who essentially taught us all that this was okay, that the empire was the great halcyon days of Englishness or Britishness. Why, now that we know much, much more about what happened, would there be a sense of personal loss when we discover some of the horrors and some of the hideousness that was done in the names of our forebears? That's what I can't pin down. 0345 60 60 973. And it may be really obvious. It may be that there are some echoes of empire in modern political opinions that begin to look quite unsavoury and quite unseemly when the more you explore or the more you examine their roots. 25 after 11 is the time. Phone lines are open. Malcolm is in Tisbury in West Wiltshire. Malcolm, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, mate. First time caller.
You're very welcome.
Yeah,
you've picked your moment, haven't you? This is an interesting subject on which to break your duck. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say, Malcolm.
I'm going to come round to the F word in a minute, Farage.
Okay.
But I grew up in the East End of London.
Yes.
My dad was at the Battle of Cable Street, all that rubbish, Well, the deal with that is I went to school, we had Asians in there, we had Jews in there, we had we had a Chinatown 200 years ago, so I didn't actually understand racism until I moved away.
Gosh.
And then and what's happened is you move forward today, and like these people who follow Farage around, they look at the pink on the map, they put Spitfires on their social media, thinking that there's a world that never was. It never was there. But the dividing thing was, you go back to Victorian times, they're sending white kids up chimneys and all that stuff.
Yes.
But what they wanted to do was divide it to make the whites feel superior, so that, they could talk about, Corporal Jones's fuzzy wuzzies and all that business.
Yes.
So to my thinking, they made it racist to keep the indigenous English population on side, the people who are being stuffed in the mills and down the mines and all that stuff, and it works up to today. You come up with Farage and his lot, they talk about the brown people, they're dehumanising them, all that stuff. It's exactly the same thing in my view. And what they're looking at is these people on social media who, they talk about, the good old days in whatever it was, when the world map was pink and all that. And you and I know it never existed.
Well, the empire existed, but the good old days, the good old days in the context that you're describing didn't, because the ancestors of the people that we're discussing, as you remind us, would have been working in mills, sleeping in workhouses, or being sent up chimneys. That's not an opinion. That's counting. That's the statistical reality of the sort of, even up to and including the Downton Abbey era. We'd be butlers and housemaids. We would not be lords of the manor. But why the personal sense of affront then? Because if I was the lord of a manor, or if on my family tree I had lords of the manor, then I might understand why some people take it personally. Why would someone like Robert Jenrick describe historical fact, as an attack upon British culture? What is he talking about?
Oh, yeah, but Robert Jenrick's a chiseler, isn't he?
Yeah, but you can't have that. We can't have that as an answer. Inarguable truth though it may be. Go on.
Explain the answer. I mean, we all know that he's gone from, Remainers, all that. Robert Jenrick says things for effect. He knows that he's starting to get people on side.
All right, then, let me scratch that then. The people he's appealing to, why do they feel a personal affront at the idea of the British Empire being built on racist ideology?
Well, of course, because we start from the premise that those people are racist in the first place.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, all right. Bear in mind, I'm not a professional wordsmith like you. I'm just an ordinary bloke.
Mate, you're doing all right, Malcolm. You're doing all right.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, we all know the spoons argument. They sit, old men sitting around. Oh, I did this and I did that.
Yeah.
Why don't they have conscription? Those sort of there's an element with those people.
Days!
They talk about Croydon Starn and all that over their beer and all that. These are the people who have this view that they shouldn't be here. They should sink the boats, and now the ones who are affronted. I don't understand why they're like that. Because
I do.
Me,
you've just shown me. No, you've just shown me, because we're overthinking it. You and I, we're two steps away. So when people are told the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function, that it is being implicitly conveyed and explicitly conveyed that racist ideology is bad, and that is what they're objecting to. The absolutely stone cold, the treatment of a stone cold fact that racist ideology is bad. How dare they tell us that racist ideology is bad? So it's not really the fact that the British Empire is of questionable provenance that they're objecting to, because that's kind of impossible to explain. They're objecting to being told that racist ideology is bad because they still subscribe to it.
Well, I think in that one little couplet you put together there, you probably explained Trump, Farage, and Netanyahu.
Yeah, you just gave me the Lego block bricks. I literally only saw that while you were talking.
Yeah, well, I was good at loading bullets for you to fire. So there you go.
Well, okay, some people won't like that analysis. In which case, you know what to do. 0345 6060 973. So you're telling people, crikey, that was a good call. You're telling people that they're better than someone else, even as you treat them like scum, right? So go and clean my chimneys, come and polish my boots, go and warm my slippers, go and put toothpaste on my toothbrush. But don't worry, you are the chosen people. You are God's chosen people, and I can prove it to you because we're about to head off to Africa and India and take over and rule based upon, well, I don't know what else you could call it than a form of racist ideology. So what is it? What is the personal affront that people feel when they are presented with facts such as the one that this report contains? And I guess, why would the Home... You can have a crack at this, although you won't be as across the facts as you might usually be when you ring in, because the report has only been published today, and it's unlikely that you've had the chance to read all 52 pages. But why would the Home Office be so desperate to suppress a report that explains some of the reasons for the Windrush scandal, including 30 years of racist immigration legislation and resistance to the fact that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function? It's 11:32. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
What do you lose is the thing. What do you personally lose when you learn more about our history? So whether you want to talk about British people or English people, English history or British history is up to you. It's a largely English condition that we're describing in 2024. But empire itself was profoundly British. I mean, particularly, I think the role played by Scottish people in the empire, notably India and the kind of jute trade and other elements of the East India Company. You can't separate the two in that context. But this peculiar sense of personal affront when presented with historical facts. I'll tell you now, there are two topics that we have come up against in recent months that we're going to be coming up against a lot more in the future, solely because I find them so fascinating. The first we did yesterday for the umpteenth time, but still haven't achieved full satisfaction. The notion of there being an enormous army of young people ready and willing to work, but being somehow prevented from doing so, which all politicians now, Keir Starmer in his Labour Party conference speech alluded to millions of them, ambitious and highly talented, while talking about immigration, ambitious and highly talented British people who can't get the jobs that they want to do. And we just keep struggling to find any. And then the other, on a completely different tip, is the kind of stuff that gets thrown up when people like Honest Bob Jenrick start talking about English culture being under attack or English culture not being properly revered. What is he appealing to? He's appealing to precisely the sensibilities that feel offended or affronted when it is explained that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. Why would anybody be offended or affronted by that in 2024? I just want you to tell me. 0345 6060 973. Clive talks about that being ashamed the more you learn about it, the more... Here you go. I was also schooled in a public school in the 80s, James, when the sentiment was to be proud to be British. I wonder if some of the resistance to accepting our doings is not wanting to accept that we should be ashamed of our past. I guess a sense of collective shame, perhaps, Clive, but not personal. I'm not remotely ashamed of anything that was done in the name of the British Empire. Why would I be? Why would you be? Even if it was your own granddad, why would you be ashamed? Maybe I'm missing something. Holly's in Derby. Holly, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello, Holly.
I'd like to say, I think, obviously, in this day and age now, back then, racism was like, oh, yes, that's 100% back it. We love it. We love being racist. Now, obviously, everyone's like, no, you're not allowed to do that today. You're not allowed to be racist today. And there's a few people like, yeah, cool, get it. There's a few people that are like, hold on a minute. I can't be racist. I'm not allowed to be racist.
Can't say what you want in this country without being locked up.
Yeah, that's an infringement on my free speech, la, 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 you know how they say. That's basically what this is. They're saying that the British Empire was 110% racist. I know that. You know that. History knows that. But we want to deny that. A lot of people want to deny that. They don't want to know that that happened, that Britain was a part of the racist regime. They don't want to know that Britain colonised countries and killed and murdered and raped.
But just slow down. Why? I didn't come on that leap with you. You haven't said anything that's untrue. But why the leap from being comfortable with racist ideology, being subscribing to racist ideology, whether you realise it or not, and then hating the history, the genuine history of imperial conquest? How does one lead to the other?
That's a question I don't know.
No, me neither. Malcolm got close. Is that what you're really saying is that racist ideology is really, really bad, And in fact, whether
it's always been bad.
Yeah, I know that, and you know that.
It's all we normal people know that, but there's people out there that don't know that will get angry at this and say,
people who
why are
dispute
you calling
it.
Britain racist?
But here's an example. I never know whether people are yanking my chain when they send me things like this, but I've got a horrible feeling this is real. Dear James O'Brien, why are you ashamed of being British? Why? So this person heard me just before you came on, Holly, say, I've got absolutely nothing to be ashamed about. I'm not remotely ashamed. Why would I be ashamed? I didn't do anything. Even if my granddad had done it, I wouldn't be ashamed because I didn't do it. Why would anyone be ashamed? And yet this person, who I suspect is ashamed, is projecting in ways I just don't understand. Why are you ashamed of being British? Why do you yourself want to destroy your own empire and your own people? I know it's because you are a socialist, and we all know who was the most famous socialists in all of history, don't we? The Nazis. So I guess if you needed an advert on a billboard to extol the importance of studying history, that's what you'd use. Otherwise, you end up like this. But this notion of shame, why would anybody British in 2024 be ashamed to learn or discover? Go on.
I don't think they're ashamed. I think they're embarrassed. I think it's embarrassment.
But why is it even embarrassing?
Because obviously racism is a big no-no now, and nobody likes to admit. Well, not nobody.
It's enjoying a bit of a comeback, isn't it?
It's coming back strong.
Yeah.
It's coming back fighting. But obviously it's a big no-no now. It's a big no-no, and people that admit it know that they're going to be faced with a lot of hate. Some people will, but back then it wasn't embarrassing. It wasn't embarrassing to be racist. It wasn't hateful to be racist. It was normal. It was common practice. So it's embarrassing for those people now to say, for this to come out and be like, the British Empire was racist. It was born upon racism. The whole foundation was built upon racism.
Do you know, I'm uncomfortable with one element. Is to.
And for people to admit that and openly say, it was it's embarrassing for them. So they're like, I'm still proud to be British. I'm proud to be British.
So if you say,
it's embarrassing, they're embarrassed.
So you are not superior to other races. You did not have some sort of divine right to dominion over other ethnicities and other races. And to say that, no, not you personally, you silly sausage, but not that to say that historically is to say that contemporaneously. So you're saying to people, no, you're not better. So, our friend who just accused me of, I'm not quite sure what he accused me of, he needs to feel in his bones that because you're black and he's white, you're better than he is. And
that's how it's looked at. That's basically how it's looked at. Like, I am better because I'm black, but really, you see yourself better because you are white and I am black. I'm the minority in this situation, not you. You're not the minority. I am. I should be angry at this, not you. I should be.
Yes.
My family,
exactly.
My family's from Jamaica.
Listen, the legacy of exploitation makes sense, but the legacy of anger at having the exploitation explain. Oh, okay. So why? Yeah, so why does the experience of your ancestors? No, because that doesn't work either, because the exploitation is inarguable. Slavery is a historical fact, an utterly unjustifiable aberration of basic humanity. Thank you, Holly. It's all helping. This is nice from Mick. It's a mirror, James. If you deny the overt racism of the past, you can allow the covert racism of today. So anybody who's got a problem with the reporting and the recording of the racist ideology that underpinned empire has actually got a problem with the idea of racist ideology being roundly condemned. That's a bit simple. That's a bit too easy, isn't it? 0345 6060 973. I will make you very welcome if I'm talking about you. If you can tell me, without saying that you think that we should have the right to dominion over people with dark skin, if you can tell me why having the reality of racism in the British Empire explained and recorded offends you personally, it affronts you personally, then I would love to explore how you think that works, how you think you've ended up in that position. It's coming up to 11:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
The weird thing about it is the mirror, isn't it? Dave in Bournemouth and many others are recommending a book called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, which I haven't read, but the title's fairly self-explanatory, isn't it? The kind of people who march around the place calling everybody else snowflakes are actually the most fragile of all. They're frightened of their own history. So the mystery of what on earth honest Bob Jenrick was talking about when he claimed that mass migration and woke culture had put England's national identity at risk, and then had an absolutely dismal interview on Sky News with the rather splendid Matt Barbette, who just kept asking him to tell us what England's national identity was. And the reason why Jenrick couldn't say so and made such a fool of himself was because he just meant that there are too many brown people here. And he can't say that out loud. And that's why this Home Office report is so interesting. Remember, Jenrick, as Amelia Gentleman reminded us, was one of the politicians that wanted to keep it secret. The fact that government policy for decades has been built upon a desire to reduce the proportion of brown and black-skinned people in this country, leading up to the Windrush scandal. And the report commissioned by the Home Office, where he was a minister, into how the Windrush scandal could have happened, concluding that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. So there was a lot of mystery. We didn't do it as a phone-in, partly because I didn't quite understand what was going on, but I do now. Why couldn't honest Bob Jenrick explain what he meant by England's national identity when he claimed it was being put at risk by woke culture and mass immigration? Answer, he just meant there are too many brown people around. Because if you'd asked him what's at risk? What's at risk? Are they taking away our cricket? Are they taking away our Earl Grey tea? Are they taking away the sort of history of... I always struggle on the English because so many of them were actually Scottish. But, you know, if you'd allow me a couple of mistakes, taking away the philosophies of David Hume, Jeremy Bentham. What is this English identity that's under risk? Well, who is honest Bob Jenrick appealing to when he talks about English identity being under threat from immigration? He is appealing precisely to the people who think there's too many brown faces behind the tills at their local Sainsbury's. Despite the fact, of course, that it's their Brexit that has actually increased the proportion that they've got such a problem with. So then we come back to the question of who can take it as a personal affront to be told that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function. Answer, people who love racist ideology. I might be a bit too simplistic. Yasmin's in Bracknell. Yasmin, what would you like to say?
Hiya. So I'm a first-time listener, long-time... is that the right?
Well, welcome.
First-time caller.
Not listening. Yes, carry on. I'll let you... I'll try not to interrupt you.
So my kind of feeling behind this is possibly that the more we learn about the impact that the British Empire has had on countries around the world, and the more we understand about the link and the kind of long-term consequences we're seeing still happening within those countries, and that being kind of directly related to our impact, maybe people are starting to fear that that could then have an impact on our lives directly if we start like having a need to, for example, having to support those countries. So because obviously at the moment, as we know, there's a lot financially within the country that we're struggling with already. I think maybe people, again, it comes from this fear of maybe feeling like, oh, well, what does that mean for England? Will we then have to, will we then not have anything for ourselves?
You mean a reckoning? You mean a form of reparation? People are terrified of the wealth that was incredibly unfairly redistributed across centuries might be redistributed back in a fairer fashion. And that is why people are spooked.
Potentially, they feel. I get that the kind of narrative is that from their perspective, it feels like, I don't know, like maybe like role reverse. A lot of the arguments I hear is that they're getting too much. They're getting too much back now, and in looking at these kind of hold debates, wondering whether it's kind of a feeling that something's going to be taken back from them in order to kind of allow people to actually...
Now, if I lived in a stately home or I still owned plantations in Jamaica or my, I don't know that there are Indian equivalents of the West Indian experience, but I could be wrong. I would get it. But what are they going to take from me? I grew up in Kidderminster.
Well, I don't know whether it's like a kind of if it becomes like a kind of more kind of national need to give back from kind of a government perspective, and then people might feel that on kind of an implication on, say, in taxes or I don't know, would it ever get to that level where it's actually when's the government being held responsible to kind of support other nations?
And the same people who've got huge problems with being told the truth about the British Empire are the people who are constantly susceptible to provocations to hate, for example, foreign aid or whatever. I mean, not that foreign aid is built upon a moral requirement to atone for the sins of our fathers, but you can see how the two speak to a similar impulse, can't you?
Yeah, and then the same as if with I suppose the conversations around immigration as well. So people who are coming from places potentially where to come to England, and that kind of same argument kind of maybe falling over the top for that as well, where it's like, the more we see the impact that happens in other countries and coming to somewhere, I don't know. Yeah, sorry. No,
I get it. Your thread remains, and that also the other element of that is that it was the empire that, of course, made us multicultural. It was the empire that involved people coming here from all of its corners in order to make their home, because we told them they were British as well. I like this. I'm enjoying this conversation, but as I said, it's one that is very much for the ages, because historians find themselves increasingly under fire from right-wing media for doing history. It began with the National Trust. I don't know if you remember. It began with the National Trust putting up information about the property you were visiting, and a certain class of Englishmen hated it. They wanted less information because the information was troubling. Some of the information was troubling. This house was built on the proceeds of exploitation. But I mean, does it stop you enjoying what is being taken away from me? What is being taken away from Billy Buncher Numbers with the Bulldog avatar and his Union flag bow tie? What is being taken away from him when he is told, when his face is rubbed in the fact that, to quote this report, the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function? How the hell else do you think it worked? I forgot the figure. Go back 110 years. You've got, I think, 150,000 British people in India and 300 million Indians. I may have got those numbers slightly wrong, in which case sue me. How on earth, if not through some form of racial and or moral superiority, were they stroke we going to convince them stroke us that they had a God-given right or some sort of inviolate right to rule? Eli's in Oxford. Eli, what would you like to say?
I just think the reason why they don't want it to come out is because they're scared of the impact that it would have. But the other point I want to make is that when looking at history, we need to understand that history is normally written in the eyes of the winner.
Yes,
so
very
we don't
much
actually see so it's normally one-sided.
So our imperial history for 100 years has been an exercise in self-congratulation.
Yeah.
And it's these new historians like Dharimpal and Olusogo and Satnam Sanghera who are scaring the horses.
Yeah, because these things come out, they realise how brutal it is, and then some of these, and then let's say, so you wouldn't get the Duke who's there now, who's profiting from slavery now, but let's say their son.
Great grandson.
When the land gets passed over to when the land gets passed over to their son, the person who's got it now. So when it gets past their son in, let's say, 30 years, their son just decides to, I can't do with this. I just didn't feel right about it, and decides to give it back. They don't want that to happen. They want it to stay within the family. So they're scared of the actual truth.
No, but that makes sense for them. So the people and some of them are great, actually. David Harewood talks very powerfully and warmly about the Earl of Harewood, whose ancestors owned his ancestors. That's why his name is Harewood, because his ancestors were owned by the Earl of Harewood's ancestors. But if you visit his castle now, I can't remember if it's called Harewood Castle or not, but if you visit it now, there's a whopping great picture of David in the foyer and lots of information about the past. He's not offering to give David his castle, but he is just telling the truth about where the money came from, or much of the money came from, that built the castle, and nobody loses.
There's a lot of people out there who just don't want to admit the truth, and they think, they just want to go with what they're told, and
because you're stealing something from me. You're stealing that little swell in my breast that I felt as a 9-year-old, reading H. Rider Haggard, and looking at the map of the empire when it was all pink, and that little swell I felt. You're stealing it from me by telling me the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and that doesn't make me racist.
It does, very much so, but. We should know what's happened, and we should be able to hear both sides. As horrible as it makes people look, it's the truth.
But it only makes dead people look horrible.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. So let me try and put this down a different route. So I'm a black person myself. What could potentially happen is, let's say I find out that there was a lot worse things that happened during the whole slave trade movement.
Yes.
Yeah. And it would then, and me naturally now has got no issue. Okay, yeah, that's what happened. But let's say I found out there was something, I don't know what to, I'll use an example. Let's say there's something worse that happens, which makes the whole situation 10 times worse.
Right.
That might fuel me to start just automatically hating white people, thinking that they're all slave owners and blah, 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 which I didn't have before.
Yeah, okay. Or it might prompt you to chuck a statue of a prominent slaver into the harbour in Bristol.
Yeah.
Which, of course, happened. And precisely the sort of people that we're trying to analyse this hour had a fit of the vapours about it. And the answer is to... I wonder if it's Harewood House, not Harewood Castle, so I was close. So that's the problem, isn't it? I wonder whether the people that we're talking about would even be able to answer the questions that we're trying to answer on their behalf.
I just don't think they just want to admit it.
Don't take away my warm swell of patriotic pride. And my apologies to the lady who asked me to stop using the phrase bulldog avatar because she loves bulldogs and she thinks I'm misrepresenting them. So I need a new phrase for that. Eli, great stuff. Thank you. Last word on this, I think, to Ben, who's in Lytham in Lancashire. Ben, what would you like to say? Lytham St Anne's, to give it its proper title. What's on your mind this morning?
So I think there's a couple of things. First of all, that the reason that the government suppresses the report is to admit that there was governmental racism in Victorian times and then again governmental racism in the 50s through to the 80s, is then to invite parallels to be drawn with current day government.
Yeah.
So does that? Is there a fear that some of our policies will be looked at not as right-wing policies but as racist policies? You know, in the 50s and 80s, we were moving people around the world to suit us, and all of a sudden, hang on, is it okay for us to want to move people,
to get rid of
refugees and get rid of them and send them to Africa because we're moving people around the board like pawns again? But the second point about why people are affronted by it. And you say, why should I be embarrassed?
Yes.
And why should I be bothered by this? It happened in the past. Is that your identity isn't built on the fact that you're superior as a white man to anybody else?
We're back to that, and maybe everyone in the category you've just described completely underestimates the prevalence of that feeling among the people we're trying to understand.
Swells with pride, not because...
Or if it swells with hatred.
Yeah, hatred and pride that you're... Because we ruled over all these black and brown people.
Yeah.
And so we must be better than them. And then if you're told, well, actually, that was all very, very wrong, what happened, well, then what have I got to be proud of now?
What's my identity built on?
Where is my identity gone? How do I put the Union Jack out the window and the bulldog? I'm sorry, okay, we won't talk about bulldogs.
No,
but,
please,
how do I?
If you don't
how
mind.
do I?
Hey, we could talk about French bulldogs. That's probably all right.
And I think it's about and when people are talking about, okay, well, it's an attack on British values.
Yeah,
British values are very, very subjective, aren't they?
Well, of course they are. Of course they are. And you talk about English values, it's even harder to pin down. Or English identity, honest Bob Jenrick was talking about. And I think we've worked out what he meant, haven't we? He talks about woke and mass immigration is attacking English identity, he means the proportion of non-white people is too high, which is exactly what this Home Office report reveals has been policy since the 1950s and caused the scandal, the unconscionable scandal of Windrush.
Yeah.
I think we've done it, Ben. It's Miss Jow next, so let's see if we can keep up this habit of successfully unravelling the most Gordian of knots. It's 1 minute after 12.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh, Lord, I even got Lytham St Anne's wrong. My apologies. It's two places, Lytham and St Anne's, 4 miles apart, only lumped together as Lytham St Anne's as a postal district. You'll be telling me next that that's not where the statue of Les Dawson is, that I remember from my childhood. Miss Jar is upon us. That is not one of the mysteries currently in need of solving, but who knows what's going to pop up between now and 1 o'clock. This is, after all, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. I think I can say that in my sleep now. I can say the phone number in my sleep, 0345 6060 sausages. Oops. I get children. People send me little clips of their children saying the phone number from the back of the car because they've had LBC on for so long, and the child can go, I wonder if anyone's first words were 0345 6060 973. It's a phone-in. You ring in with a question, someone else provides an answer. If you're particularly brilliant, there's a wonderful, wonderful prize. Namely, a Mystery Hour board game. You can find out full terms and conditions for that competition, which essentially involves me picking my favourite contributor of the week and giving them a Mystery Hour board game at lbc.co.uk. Some people still think that the Mystery Hour board game, like Keith, is a figment of my imagination. A figment of my imagination. It's not. It's real. I can prove it at mysteryhour.co.uk. I can't prove that Keith exists. I'm not sure I'd want to. But you can go to mysteryhour.co.uk to find out how you can get hold of a game should you not be lucky enough to win one. 6 minutes after 12 is the time. I get some nice messages when we do. I'm looking at Andrea and Jazz and Seema and others when we do conversations like the one we had in the last hour. I appreciate they're still quite rare in the British media, but things are getting better, and I do take your warm and very kind words to heart. I really do, and rest assured that I will continue to fight these battles. Whether it's on your behalf or not, I don't know, but I will continue to fight these battles because it's the right thing to do. But time now for some fun. Should we crack straight on? Have I done all the housework? Have I done all the rubric, all the T's and C's at lbc.co.uk? Richard's in Twickenham. Richard, question or answer?
I've got a question for you, James.
Carry on.
So, it's a question about snails.
Good.
If you step on the snail, I know, and you break its shell, but the snail itself is otherwise unharmed, can the snail carry on living? Basically, I mean, obviously it's going to be more vulnerable to predators, but is there something about a snail that requires its shell day to day beyond protection? Can
a snail survive sans shell?
Yes.
How old were you when you discovered that slugs were not simply homeless snails?
I think I always knew that.
Did you? Oh, you're clever. You had a better education than me. My parents deserve a refund.
I've seen them both, but the reason I ask is that I live in your neck of the woods, and we have a lot of snails and slugs in the garden.
I think everyone does. I don't think it's unique to southwest London.
Well,
slugs are driving me dotty at the moment. They played havoc with my radishes, and that's not a figure of speech.
I know. I mean, obviously, I try to avoid stepping on snails, but it happens, particularly after dark. So I was just wondering whether they're viable without a shell.
We shall find out. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I don't think Eleanor would let me dedicate a small section of the programme to the best slug repellent tactics available out there, but I've had one more go at my radishes. I've sowed one more crop, and I reserve the right in the next 2 weeks probably to return to the question of slug repellent. I don't mean slug repellent as in a bottle of slug repellent. I mean modes of repelling slugs. Catriona is in Glasgow. Catriona, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Oh, yes.
Why do Americans call a cup of coffee a Joe?
Oh, a Joe?
Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah, I saw it in a movie, actually, where the guy's asking for a cup of Joe.
Oh, a cup of Joe. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I like it. And it's probably like Hoover and probably a brand name, isn't it? That became generic. So one of the I imagine it would involve one of the early purveyors of coffee. The name of their brand involving Joe somewhere. So a cup of Joe, like asking for a Hoover when you mean a vacuum cleaner, because they were. Do you see what I mean? But yeah. I'm not going to take a. I'm not going to take a round of applause for that. Why do Americans call a cup of coffee a cup of Joe? A cup of Joe. Thank you, Catriona. That's on the board. So snails and coffee. It's all there. 10 after 12. Haval is in Norbury. Haval, question or answer?
Question, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When you are sitting on the plane and on the runway,
yes.
The plane is accelerating before takeoff.
Yes.
You feel pushed back. There's a force pushing you back in the seat.
You do.
However, when you are up in the sky, the plane, I assume, is going even faster.
Yeah.
You don't feel that push. It just, everything becomes normal.
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
So would I now.
What the reason?
Me too. That's insane.
I've flown many, many times, never thought about it. Last week, or the week before, I was on a plane, and I said, what's going on here?
Yeah.
That force is gone.
And it's not just when you're at an angle, is it? It's not just when you're going...
No, I mean, it's the plane is going straight on the runway. You feel this push, and which is very nice, as if you are in an F1 car or something.
Yes, I quite like that as well. I think it's G-force. It's probably a form of G-force. Well, it probably isn't. Don't
But
at
when
me.
you are up in the sky...
When you're going really fast, you don't feel any resistance at all.
No.
Oh, I like that question. And it should be quite easy to answer, shouldn't it?
I hope so.
I do too.
So.
What I mean is someone who knows. If you know, Haval, you know. If you know, you know. But we do not know. We don't know.
You'll never know.
Well, I hope we will know, not never know. But if you don't know, you'll never know until someone who does know tells you what they know.
Indeed.
Which is how Mystery Hour works. 0345 606 0973. You know, 12 after 12 is the time. Nico is in Appledore. Nico, question or answer?
Hi, James. Yeah, I've got a question.
Excellent.
What is the official dividing line between North and South London? Because it can't be the river, because Chelsea is north of the river, but is southwest London. And why is there a north N1, N2, N3 postcode?
No, you can only have one. No, you can only have one question. No. You have to get through another day. So why? Well, what is the official?
What is the official?
Well, what if there isn't an
official?
What if there isn't an official dividing line?
Well, there must have been where they decided what was going to be northwest.
Oh, you mean
postcodes?
Southwest. So if we're talking about postcodes.
Well,
not just.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, that must also therefore be the official dividing line between north and south.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, it will be. You talk about South London. I'm thinking south of the river, but Chelsea is SW3, SW7.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's been driving me nuts.
If you start at, where would you start? Charing Cross? And just draw a straight line.
Then it becomes central, doesn't it? That becomes
no, hang on. Let me finish.
Sir.
Let me finish, sir. You start at Charing Cross and you draw a straight line west and east.
Yeah.
And that's north and south, maybe.
Well, where would you draw the line from? Trafalgar Square? Or
Charing Cross, Trafalgar Square, somewhere like that.
Possibly.
Could be that.
But do we know that it's official, or is it just nonsense?
I don't know. I mean, you're right. Where does S meet N?
Well, exactly.
I was hoping you'd tell me.
Can't you ask to do the N1,
No,
N2,
absolutely
N3,
not.
S1, S2?
No.
It's about north and south.
No, I know it is, but it's two questions and you're only allowed one. That's not an opinion, it's counting. Also, it is. I think it's in the Mystery Hour board game, actually, that one. So it's definitely come up before. It's quite often with things like postcodes and street allocations. It's all quite arbitrary, but I can't remember the answer to this, to the one you wanted to ask, but I'm not letting you. And I don't think before dealt with the question that you have asked, and I am letting you. It's 12:14, and Anthony's in Manchester. Anthony, question or answer? Anthony, is there anybody there? No? That's interesting. Let's take a moment.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:16 is the time. In a very occasional feature, very occasional series, it's time to play I Think You've Texted the Wrong Person, Kieran, on this occasion. Should I get the shopping to come over at the weekend? I mean, unless that's code for something, in which case I stress again, the slugs really have ravished my radishes this year. I'm not making any allusions to my private life. I don't know, Kieran, really. What are you thinking of buying? 0345 606 0973. You can WhatsApp me. In fact, you have. Have you done that? Have you got that? Oh, it's because your contacts, I'm next to Lover Boy or Lover Girl or Lionel or Laura or something like that. Back to the game in hand. Jane's in Wimborne. Jane, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Jane.
I would like to understand why, when clothes moths attack cotton T-shirts, they almost always go for the lower abdomen area on the front.
Do they?
No matter how the T-shirts sit in a drawer, folded or just squished in, when they're pulled out, and if the moths have been at them, the holes are always in that area.
Are you sure about this?
I really am sure. I have unfortunately, loads of T-shirts to prove the point, as do my children.
And they're always around the navel area?
In the navel area. So at first I thought, well, could it be not be moths, but in fact contact with belt buckles, but it's not that.
Could it be, I mean, I know you wash your clothes carefully, but could it be some form of residue? No, you're not going to have any residue. It'd be the armpits, wouldn't it? It
would be. And any food staining, if there was to be food staining, is higher up. And
mine certainly is.
And I do try and wash my clothes very carefully.
Yeah. So, okay. So why do moths appear to favour the belly button, the abdominal area of garments? And I mean, this is T-shirts, is it, as opposed to wool and because you strike me as a cashmere kind of woman, Jane. I don't know whether that's fair or not, but
I have had the odd item of cashmere.
The moths bloody love it, don't they? It's absolutely shocking. Yes. But this is specific to cotton. This question.
This is T-shirts.
Yeah,
specifically T-shirts, and it's a mystery to me.
It's a mystery to me now, but that is, of course, why we are both appearing on Mystery Hour. So what's going on with Jane's T-shirts? 0345 6060973. Cyril's in Eltham. Cyril, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Cyril.
Okay, the iconic St Paul's Cathedral.
Oh, yes.
Okay, it's got two towers either side of it. Big dome.
Yeah.
One's got a clock.
Yeah.
And one's got a gaping hole that's never been filled.
Has it?
I wonder why.
What do you mean a gaping hole? I'm trying to picture it.
There's two towers exactly the same, and one's got a big circle in it, which is empty, like a window, but it's not.
Right.
And one's got a clock in it. The other side's got a clock.
Couldn't be moths, could it?
It's not the navel, unfortunately.
So it's to the left when you're looking at it. They're not on either side of the dome. They're on one side of the. Well, they are. If you're looking at it from the side, they're at one end. But if you're looking at it head on, then they're on either side of the dome, but quite far in front of it. And only one's got
and the other one's got an aperture which hasn't been filled.
So it looks like a missing clock or a missing
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. You're on. I like that one. Nice one, Cyril.
James, that's the second time you got me on that one.
And about the 10 millionth time it's happened in your life. 20 minutes after 12 is the time. So it's all about not telegraphing it. Oh, at least we amuse each other, Cyril. Becky's in Doncaster. Becky, question or answer?
Answer.
Oh, splendid. Carry on.
Snails.
Oh, yes.
Basically, the shell is supported by a mantle, which is like a muscular plug inside the shell.
Ooh.
If that shell goes, the lungs can no longer be supported by the outside structure of the shell, and they suffocate.
Oh, Lord.
So you cannot... So once the snail is out, that's it. It's done for.
So and so, in fact, it wouldn't even ever be tested, because even if you trod on it, what remains of the shell would be welded to the mantle, and therefore...
Pretty much. There are some examples where people have been able to heal tiny, tiny holes with like plaster of Paris.
Yeah.
But it's very rare.
So all right. So the snail, its lungs won't work if the shell's not there. That's the simple way of putting it.
The structure supports the lung organs, and without that, it's got no chance.
Qualifications?
I keep them. I currently have 2. I used to have 18 giant African land snails.
What happened to the other 16?
They die of old age eventually.
Natural wastage.
Yes.
What sort of snails do you have? African land snails. How big are they on a good day?
My biggest one's about the size of my fist.
Okay.
Pretty big.
Yeah. I had, I tried to keep snails from the garden once. And I was gonna try and eat them. Have you got a problem with that? Is that?
No.
You wouldn't eat an African land snail, would you?
Well, you can't eat African ones because they've been around rat poo, and there's a whole thing with that and parasites and things. So don't
very
do that.
wide. Yeah, very good advice there for life. And do you know, I made a terrible mistake. So my wife, this is going back a long time, was doing an article, I think, for the Times about eating things that you don't normally eat. So we got some crayfish out of the, I know you said the serpentine. In London, it's full of crayfish. I bet you didn't know that, did you? And they get and it's not something that British fishmongers can sell much of. So they empty the serpentine out of crayfish and ship them all to continental Europe. So we had some, and we did some foraging and we had some other things. And she wasn't interested in my idea that we use garden snails and try and make them into escargot. But I did it anyway. And do you know the terrible mistake that I made?
Go on.
I gave them names, Becky.
Oh, don't do that.
No, then I couldn't do it. So, they weren't particularly imaginative names. I can't remember all of them, but one of them was definitely called Snaily. And then somehow the idea of eating garden snails, because I do rather like escargot, was fine. But as soon as they had names, the idea of eating Snaily was a different proposition entirely.
Oh, never name what you eat. Bad times.
No, I completely agree. Round of applause for you. And we're confident that the same rule applies to little snails as it does to big snails.
Yeah. The breathing hole is underneath the shell within the mantle itself. If you pick a snail up upside down, you can see it opening and shutting.
Fantastic. Anyway, you've already had your round of applause and you have educated and illuminated all of us. Steve's in Crawley. Steve, question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on, Steve.
Your aeroplane, why you don't feel it.
Yeah.
It's all to do with good old Einstein and his relativity. When you reach the same speed as the aeroplane, because when it's taking off, you're being dragged along.
Yeah.
When you reach the same speed as the aeroplane, it's conservation of momentum and you just don't feel it. Just like exactly if you're standing on the Earth at the equator, you don't feel that you're moving at 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah. Oh, relativity. As in it's all relative.
That. I mean, we're spinning around the planet at about 1,000 miles an hour if you're on the equator. Earth is spinning around the sun at several thousand miles an hour. The sun is spinning round our galaxy at hundreds of thousand miles an hour, and our galaxy is rocketing through space even faster than that. But we don't feel any of it because we're moving at the same speed as it.
And so what role does acceleration play?
Acceleration is simply when something is being accelerated, the thing that isn't being tied to it. Like if you were in a car, deceleration is the same thing. If you were in a car and you weren't wearing a seatbelt and you slammed on your brakes, you'd go flying through the windscreen because your body is still trying to move at the same speed as the car was moving.
So it's related to relativity. It's part of it.
It is. It's all to do with relativity.
It is. So it is. I mean, you could answer acceleration.
Yeah.
Oh no! Look, people are getting cross with you, man.
Well, acceleration is.
Well, hang on. What are your qualifications?
I just love everything to do with physics and space.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting a lot of messages saying it's Newton, not Einstein, but I don't know whether that makes you right or wrong.
Newton was before Einstein. Newton didn't invent relativity. He discovered.
No, but this might not be relativity.
Gravity.
This might just be acceleration.
Well, no, because it's still to do with relativity, which is all inside of it. Acceleration on its own doesn't explain it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I mean, acceleration does cause the effect. Like if you accelerate it, if you accelerate it at 1g, if you're in space, if you're in space, you're floating around. But if you accelerate at 1g, you'll feel like you've got gravity on Earth.
Of course you will.
Whereas if you decelerate at 1g, you'll go smacking into the other end of the aeroplane or the other end of the spacecraft and go splat.
Round of applause,
Newton
I think.
discovered gravity.
Yeah, but he didn't discover relativity.
I'm so proud.
Well, here you go.
He
Take
didn't
it quick.
discover relativity.
Thank you. Nicely done. Your lifelong enthusiasm for physics finally bears fruit. 12:26 is the time. Zach's in Bromley. Zach, question or answer?
Answer, James, to the plane question I think the gentleman also just answered.
Oh, no. Did he get it wrong?
I think so.
Oh, no. Oh, how
he did mention
embarrassing.
Newton.
Yeah.
He mentioned Newton, but Newton's second law basically just says force equals mass times acceleration.
Yeah.
As you accelerate on a plane, you're experiencing acceleration. We're a mass, and hence you feel a force. But when you're either stationary or at a constant velocity, you're experiencing no acceleration, so you feel no force. So when the plane is at a constant in its cruise,
that's
you're
relativity.
Not being accelerated. Well, is relativity not to do with Einstein's other stuff, and
I don't know.
Space and
I'm
time.
out of my I'm going to let you in on a secret, Zach, because I'm sure you haven't been able to tell. I'm out of my comfort zone.
You're out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I'm out of my comfort zone.
Well, I mean, this is more my field of stuff.
Fair enough. So what was he wrong about?
Well, I didn't actually properly hear his call because I was kind of trying to get to you guys.
Fair enough.
But I heard him mention Einstein a lot, but I think it's just a lot more to do with Newton and his kind of laws of motion. and that second law, which is just force equals mass times acceleration.
Qualifications?
So that's why... Sorry?
Qualifications?
I'm both a pilot and then an engineer. I did aerospace engineering.
It feels like when the plane is taking off, we feel the force.
Because you're being accelerated.
Well, there it is, you see. You said it. Acceleration. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you a round of applause as well, but because of my own ignorance, I'm not going to take away Steve's. Was it Steve?
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah. So you have one too.
Amazing.
Relativity, I think, has got more to do with time in that sense, has it? I don't know. I don't imagine this comes as a major surprise to anybody who's been listening to the last 4 minutes of radio, but I haven't got a clue what's going on. And I'm not proud of it. I kind of make jokes about it, but being bad at something is bad. We used to do it with maths all the time when I was young. Oh, I'm no good at maths. But when secretly what you were saying was, I'm a poet. You say, I'm rubbish at maths, mate. Yeah, I'm a poet. I'm a romantic poet. Oh, I'm rubbish I'm not a geek. But really, being rubbish at maths is rubbish. You should be good at maths, or at least try harder to be better at maths. Might even make you a better poet. Glenn's in Camberley. Glenn, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Glenn.
It's regarding the holes in the T-shirt.
Holes.
So, the holes are caused by the T-shirt rubbing against the metal buttons that you get on jeans and similar trousers.
It's not that.
And
she said in her question it's not that.
She said it's not that.
Yeah.
But I have got a product that proves it is.
Have you? Here we go.
Yeah.
Flipping it.
There's a product you can buy on the internet,
yeah,
which I researched a little while back because we were getting the same problem.
Yeah.
And it's a little silicone rubber cover that goes over the buttons on your jeans, and it stops that happening.
Are you serious?
No. Yes, I am, yeah.
Right. So, I thought I was confused by the physics question. I thought I was quite safe on this one. So it's nothing to do with moths?
No, nothing to do with moths.
I think...
It's a rubbing. It's a constant rubbing against the metal.
I think you've got Occam's razor on your side, haven't you?
Well, definitely.
Because it can't be. There's no earthly way that a moth is capable of identifying.
Well, not in one place.
No, all the time. So it is rubbing on the button or the belt, and therefore...
Yeah, and there's a product on the internet available. I won't say the name of the product, but there's a product on the internet you can get.
Over a long period of time, a little silicone disc, and it comes out all right in the wash, does it?
Yeah. You can take them off when you wash them if you want to, but they're quite tight fitting over the metal button, and it fits quite snug.
Oh, of course, it goes on the metal. It doesn't go on the T-shirt.
No. On the metal button, covers the metal button off.
I don't know, though. So Eddie says the holes appear well above the belt line and are usually not central.
Well,
some people will have moths, but they won't be digging holes in all the same
place, James.
Huh?
They wouldn't be in the
That's what I'm saying. So just be, and also occasionally a moth might actually eat a hole in precisely the place that we're talking about. But
make the hole bigger.
But yeah. But the repeated incidence of holes in exactly the same place across a range of garments speaks to your theory rather than moths.
Well, we've had exactly the same problem, and it's on a number of different T-shirts in the same place.
Well, I mean, I've never had this problem. Is that because I replace my T-shirts regularly, or...?
Maybe you've got trousers where you haven't got the metal buttons, maybe, many.
I usually tuck my T-shirt in and wear something over the top of it.
Well, there you go.
If I'm wearing a T-shirt in the summer... anyway, round of applause for Glenn. I like that.
Thank you.
Played. No, well played you. Nice one. Jenny Barsby's here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:34. Forgive me for glancing briefly into the rearview mirror, but the conversation we were having in the last hour about the fear of history, of course, it has much more relevant ramifications than some of the ones, even more relevant ramifications than some of the ones we touched on. The historian Alan Lester, who works brilliantly in the field of British colonialism, a professor at the Universities of Sussex and La Trobe, was listening to David Lammy's rather impressive speech to the United Nations yesterday about the Russian government, or Russia itself, being a mafia state. It was an incredible speech. We probably should have played some of it out. I wonder whether colleagues will later in the day. Both Starmer and Lammy yesterday going much further on condemnation of Russia than previous governments have gone. Well, some, of course, have been unable to because of their coziness with cronies of Vladimir Putin. But this line here from Professor Alan Lester: if only Western right-wing historical revisionists realised the hypocrisy of defending white Britain's right to invade and redraw boundaries in the past, whilst condemning Putin today. So, another problem with empire denialism is it gives tacit permission to leaders with imperial ambitions today to do the same thing. So you can't really condemn Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine if you're comfortable with Imperial Britain invading India. I mean, it's not a colour-based observation, although David Lammy pointed out that as a black man, he understands better than most the idea of having ancestors who rose up and fought in a great rebellion of the enslaved. Just another brand, another flavour of imperialism. Incredible stuff, that. Really incredible. 12:36 is the time. Back to Mystery Hour. Richard is in Aylesbury. Richard, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Richard.
I would like to know why you have to chase an itch. And what I mean about that is sometimes I'll say to my wife, I'll give my back a scratch, and it'll be a pinpoint area on my back.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm saying, go left, go right, go up, go down. And essentially you never get to the bottom of the itch in the end, but it seems to go all around your back before you try and get it, if that makes any sense.
Okay, that is like Baloo the bear in the Jungle Book.
Yeah. You see bears normally scratch themselves on trees.
Oh, yeah, although Baloo achieves satisfaction, I think. He does hit the sweet spot, probably because he's got a whole tree, whereas your wife's only got her fingers, poor woman.
And I've only got small gardens with no trees.
No. And how often does your wife agree to do this?
Well, it depends, because she does get quite annoyed, because you spend 5 minutes trying to get to the bottom of it, and essentially we never get to the bottom.
And she's still going.
She still does it.
So why does the itch move around? Why does the itch move around? Moving itches.
Basically.
Moving itches. My first band was called the Moving Itches. It doesn't work, does it? I've got to start. One of my daughters hates that joke. It's because I do it all the time. Thank you, Richard. What's going on with a moving itch? 0345 606 0973. What's the empty tower on St. Paul's? One of them's got a clock, one of them's got nothing. What's going on there then? What was Jane's question? What have I written down there? Oh, moths. We've done that. I'll try a line through that. Nico's question about where does North London stop and South London start, and vice versa. We've done the acceleration question of Havel's. Why do Americans talk about a cup of Joe? And we have done the snails question of Richards. What was the name of the nice lady who answered the snails question, Keith? It was Becky in Doncaster as well. My first home was in Doncaster. Liz is in Shepperton. Liz, question or answer?
Question, please.
Yes.
I was visiting my husband in his office in London, and it overlooks the Thames, and there was a railing outside. Yes. Excuse me. That's and there were big seagulls, all resting. Some of them were asleep, all lined up on this railing.
Yes.
And they were all on one leg.
Yes.
Now, they were big birds, and they had one leg, and it looked very... It didn't look like the most comfortable or is the most efficient way. And I wondered why.
I know this.
Oh, do you?
Yeah,
I'm glad.
I'm glad too. And I think when you ask me what my qualifications are, I will say that we've had it before. So it's body heat.
Oh.
So a bird's leg, if you think about it, is one of the very few unfeathered, if not the only unfeathered part of a bird.
Oh.
So they will lose a lot of body heat through their leg. I don't think the beak counts, because that was probably keratin or something like that. It won't be part of the blood, business. Yeah. And therefore, if you tuck one leg under in your feathers, it keeps warm, and you're only going to be losing body heat through one leg rather than two.
Brilliant.
Isn't that nice?
I've wondered about that ever since, because they just looked a bit, I don't know,
precarious.
It looked like it's,
Looks a bit precarious.
A breath of wind.
Well, it starts with flamingos, I suppose, are the most obvious, aren't they?
Yeah.
Flamingos are always on one leg. And you'd think, well, they're in quite hot countries, but I'd say, but they're in the water. So they would lose body heat through their legs in the water, and they take one leg out of the water, tuck it in among their pink feathers, and lo and behold, they lose less body heat. They say stay warmer all round.
There you go. That's why Mystery Hour is how brilliant it is.
Oh, beautifully put, Liz. Beautifully put. Thank you.
It really is. Well done. Thank you. Round of applause to you.
Well, look at this. Absolutely right. Thank you very much. I think there's a secondary reason about just giving one of your legs a rest, but I've never bought that one, because presumably the second leg is taking more weight than the out leg is there taking more weight on its own than it would do if it was taking half of the weight of two legs. But we don't need to worry about that. We've covered it. Alan's in Chesterfield. Alan, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
You're going to like this, James, because this ties in the history of the military West.
Oh, go on.
It causes problems with the military.
Yes.
And referring back to the moth question, it's also naval.
Wow. Go on. Go on then.
I can't remember exactly when. It was in the early...
You can't big it up. You can't big it up like that, then open with an I can't remember. Go on.
In the early part of the 20th century, the Secretary of State for the United States Navy
banned
alcohol from ships.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore, the strongest thing you could have was a cup of Joe.
Yeah.
And I think they actually called it a cup of Uncle Joe.
But that doesn't tell us why it's called Joe.
Guess what the Secretary of State was called?
Frank.
No, it was called, can't remember his second name. I think it was Davidson or something like that, but it was called Joe. This is a really weird memory.
And they go, how do you know it? Where does the memory come? What are your qualifications?
About 50 years ago, I used to read a lot of magazines like Commando and Battle and Action and things
here.
like that.
Yeah,
and I just remember the storyline where somebody had joined the Navy and they couldn't get a drink.
Ah.
And he called it Uncle Joe.
And they got.
Provided the comic writers were right.
No, I'm sure they were. I think. Would it be Joseph Martinson?
No, I'm pretty sure it began with D. I keep thinking. I think it's Davidson, but I keep wanting to say Jim Davidson.
No, it's definitely not Jim Davidson.
No, it's Joe.
Well, but there is the answer. It doesn't matter what the surname is. The first name was Joe, and therefore a cup of Joe was in honour of the politician who denied them anything stronger. So they called it a cup of Joe. Daniels, Joseph Daniels, maybe Daniels.
That could be Daniels Davidson. I really can't remember. I just remember knowing where the name Joe came from.
Right,
I don't know if it was. I don't know if it's called Joe or Joseph or whatever, but it was shortened.
Yeah, it would be in those days. And it's quite a recent development to give the diminutive versions of names without, as the given name. A round of applause for Alan, please. I love those old comics, Commando comics. You can still buy them. You can buy sort of big volumes of them in like recently published. They're very much of their period. Some relevance perhaps to the conversation we're having in the last hour, but they remain amazing stories. The artwork is beautiful as well. John's in Arras in France. John, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
It's to do with North and South London.
Yes.
And it relates very strongly to postcode areas.
Yes.
So that the postcode areas roughly around the capital, N, E, W, S, E, and for our purposes, the most important one is SW.
Yes.
And so all those places, so the directions are fairly clear. SW and SE are South London.
Yes.
And N, E, and W are North London. And then right in the middle there's EC and WC for East Central and West Central.
Yes.
But for SW, for example, Chelsea is SW3, north of the river, and Brixton is SW2, south of the river. So it's the only one of the sort of postcode regions which transcends the river.
Why?
And why is because each of the areas was allocated a particular code based on where the sorting offices are. So all the areas with 1 in the postcode, so SW1, SE1, N1, that's the head district. And then you have sub-offices.
So Chelsea's an anomaly, right? And there is no sort of official designation of where north stops and south begins.
Well, the Royal Mail would tell you that north stops and south begins where the postcode line changes.
Yes, exactly.
And that was based on where the
sorting offices
the head
were.
Sorting offices were, and the sub offices as well.
Why couldn't they just have made Chelsea W? A W?
Because W is a little bit further north, so places like Bayswater, Chiswick, Acton, those kind of places that you know so well.
I do, yeah.
They are in the W.
Okay. Qualifications?
Is it? I used to do direct mail in southeast London quite a lot.
Yes.
And I also, as a student, did a lot of house hunting in the SE area, and I got to know all the different postcodes. So you know that if you want to go live in Catford, then it's SE6, or if you want to go live in Charlton, it's SE7.
So, I mean, the answer is postcodes, in a nutshell.
The answer is postcodes, and postcodes are determined by location of sorting offices.
There it is. Beautiful answer. How comprehensive. Thank you, John.
One more thing, if I may.
You may, indeed.
That within each of those areas, broadly speaking, Each sub-district, so SE2, SE3, SE4, for example, they are named alphabetically. So SE2 is Abbey Wood, SE3 is Blackheath, SE4 is Brockley.
Oh, yeah.
All the way out to SE18, which is Woolwich.
How far could you get, do you reckon?
In terms of...
Right, I mean, you got the first 2 or 3. Could you get up to 18?
Oh, yeah, easy.
Well, from memory?
Yeah.
Go on, then.
Brockley, SE4, Camberwell, SE5, Catford, SE6, Charlton, SE7, Deptford, SE8, Eltham, SE9, Greenwich, SE10, SE11 round about Hatcham, sort of around the sort of New Cross Gate area.
Stop stalling.
SE12 Lee, SE13 my beloved Lewisham, where I lived for 30 years, SE14 New Cross, SE15 Peckham, SE16 Rotherhithe, SE17 Walworth, and SE18 Woolwich.
Fantastic. That's me told. And another round of applause for getting it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sadly, not allowed to enter the Mystery Hour draw, which you might have just won if you were, because you're calling in from overseas. But there'll be other chances. 12:47 is the time. Is that the same? So fascination with this kind of thing, which I share, up to a point. I couldn't have done that in a million years. Is it a bit like my fascination with bridges and cranes and things, like this idea that we're imposing order upon the chaotic universe that we inhabit, and somehow this, because of streets and postcodes, imposing order on nature's chaos? I don't know, I'm being a bit highfalutin or pompous, depending on your perspective.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10 to 1, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We still need answers to, actually we've done quite a lot, haven't we? St Paul's has 2 towers. It's got the dome, right? Familiar with the dome, and it's got 2 towers. One of them's got a clock on it, one of them has not. What was supposed to be? Was there? I mean, it looks odd, according to Cyril, and we want to know why. Why is there an absence in that aperture when there is a clock in the other one? Why do itches move when you start scratching an itch? Why does it move around your back, as evinced by Richard, but also I think by Baloo the bear in the Jungle Book? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need for either of those. And then I've written down the bird. Oh, and I did the birds question of Lizard. So they're the only 2 still waiting for an answer, aren't they? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. It means I can squeeze in 1 or 2 more questions. Terry is in Buntingford. Terry, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Terry.
Bucket list ticked.
Pardon?
Another bucket list ticked for me.
Yes.
Right. Albinos. Can we get an albino in all species? Animals, I mean, there's seen humans, snakes, rats. Is there...
I could make you carry on like I did the last fella with the postcodes. I'll see how long we would be here.
I've only got about 5 minutes. So carry on.
We had a question recently about was it specific to albinism? Was it? So we want to know. Are you sure you get albino snakes?
Yeah. So, I used to have a couple of snakes in my time, and I didn't have an albino, but obviously having snakes, I knew that.
It wasn't just a white snake. Couldn't just be a white snake.
No, I'm sure it was. I mean, I can't go definitive on that.
No, don't worry. So, I mean, is there what can have, what species can have albinism, and what species can't? Is it most species that can?
Well, it's more. Yeah, is it in every kind of species? Or
I don't think it is in every kind of species, because is it not linked to? I don't know. Why am I trying to answer any of these questions?
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's why I'm ringing you.
Yeah, exactly that. It's got to be linked to melanin. It's got to be linked to melanin, hasn't it? So it couldn't be in all. Some species won't have any melanin. I don't know, as you've probably gathered.
You're trying.
Well, I'm always trying, Terry. You know that. Let's put it on the list. Albinism. Where can it occur? And is it? There you go. Where can it occur, or is it in most living species? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Squirrels we were talking about. Were we talking about albino squirrels? Someone started sending me pictures of albino squirrels. Do you know? One of the things about Mystery Hour is that it sticks in your mind sometimes. And we went through a phase of wondering why you never saw It was dead something. Was it dead pigeons or something like? No, you do see dead pigeons. I can't remember what it was. I just said it sticks in your mind sometimes, and I can't remember what it was at all. But on social media, I went through a period of being sent pictures of something quite unpleasant whenever somebody encountered one. And at first, I'd think, why are you sending me? Oh, it's a Mystery Hour reference. What was it? What would that have been? So I think for a while, you sent me pictures. Every time you came across an albino squirrel, you just sent me a picture of an albino squirrel, which, if you didn't know the context, would be quite a weird thing to be popping up on your social media. Brian's in Caterham. Brian, question or answer?
Answer, James.
And they weren't albino squirrels, were they, Brian? There was something else going on there, but I can't remember what. But where were we? What is your answer?
The answer is the vacant hole in St Paul's North Tower.
Holes, yes.
It's actually the bell chamber where the bells are. The bells are just out of sight below the level of the hole. There's actually 4 holes all around the tower, the same size.
Yes. So it's a belfry?
It's a belfry, yes.
So it's a silly question.
And the ringing room is halfway down where the little rectangular window is. And in the south tower is the clock mechanism.
Is that right?
Yes.
Qualifications?
A bell ringer.
Are you?
Yes.
A campanologist?
Yes.
Well, good. Have you ever rung the bells at St Paul's?
I've seen them, but it's a rather elite tower. You've got to be pretty good to get an invite to ring them.
Have you really? You can't just have a little go because you've established your credentials elsewhere?
No, I've rung at Southwark Cathedral, but I've never rung at St Paul's.
Is that? And where do you normally ring? Do you ring every Sunday?
I ring every Sunday. And
in Caterham?
Most evenings of the week in Caterham and all the surrounding towers, Bletchley, Nutfield, Godstone and all those.
What's the pleasure? Describe to me why you like it so much.
It's an exercise, really.
Yeah, it's more than that. You could do press-ups. What's the joy?
I'm slightly dyslexic, so I'm useless with numbers, and I ring by what they call rope sight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. And how? I mean, this might be a stupid question. I'm oddly fascinated by this, Brian. There's a chance you might regret ringing in. What's the difference between a good bell ringer and a less good bell ringer?
It takes years and years of practice. I've been ringing for 20 years, and I've only just got to one of the minor methods called plain hunt and Sunday service ringing. It's more companionship, social. I'm also a steeple keeper looking after the bells at my local tower.
Oh, wow. Have you ever hung on by accident and flown up into the air?
It has happened, but...
to you?
It's never happened to me, no.
But it is a thing.
It can happen if a part of the mechanical mechanism breaks.
And nervousness as well, because you should just let go, but you wouldn't, would you? It's like a human impulse.
They tend to hang on.
Yeah, you hang on, and then suddenly, next thing you know, you're up in the belfry. Oh, that's a lovely quote. Have you've been to the ones in St Paul's? You visited them, but you haven't had a go on them.
I visited them, actually, before I became a bell ringer.
Was that part of what inspired you to become a bell ringer, do you think?
No, it was a work colleague that got me into bell ringing.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for ringing in.
My pleasure.
Round of applause for Brian, please. I could do that. I'd love to have a go at that, but I'd be rubbish at it. I'd be absolutely right for a number of reasons. I've got no rhythm, and I would definitely hang on when I'm not supposed to and end up banging my head on the roof. Melissa's in Hinckley. Last word, perhaps. Question or answer, Hinckley? Hinckley? Melissa? Shall I start again? Melissa's in Hinckley. Question or answer, Melissa?
Answer.
Carry on.
So it's to do with the albinism question that you talked about.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So any organism that produces melanin, i.e. the colour.
Yeah. Can be albino.
There is a gene.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a gene that switches on the gene for melanin production.
So what would that be then? Any mammal?
Any organism that produces melanin.
What
so whether
doesn't?
It's a mammal, whether it's a reptile.
So they all have melanin?
I would
Scales,
say
skin. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah,
jellyfish. There are some jellyfish that are transparent, so that wouldn't apply to them. So anything that can produce
anything that produces melanin can have albinism.
Yes.
Qualifications?
Biological science graduate.
Round of applause for Melissa, the biological science graduate. I think we're done. The bell ringer did not deserve a Ray Liotta, DD. I mean, he was a lovely bloke, and he's definitely in the frame for the Mystery Hour board game. It's either Becky in Doncaster, who answered the snail question, or Brian in Caterham, the bell ringer. Brian the bell ringer. I'm going to let Keith decide. Brian? Okay, why do you hate Becky? If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.